Chapter 36. This woman has a boyfriend? Once the results were out, the entire class protested. You won? Snow White? You've got to be joking. What's wrong with you, class monitor? How on earth did you draw that lot? The class monitor faced the girl's criticism with a speechless expression. It wasn't drawn by me. Whatever the result, Xixia drew that lot all by himself, all right? No way. Xixia can never partner with such a person. Wouldn't he be a wolf entering the tiger's den? By allowing Yuan to perform in such an important performance, won't our F class be a joke to all other classes? On the podium, Liang Lihua's expression completely darkened as well. Yuan. Why is it Yuan again? But she had already announced in front of all the students that no matter what the result was, nobody would be allowed to dispute. There was no way she could replace her with someone else. Liang Lihua didn't have a choice. She looked at Xixia and asked, Xixia, what do you think? She will be your partner after all. At this moment, the boy held on to that slip of paper, still in disbelief that he actually drew that lot himself. He probably had never been through such a tough decision in his life. After some time, the boy forced a word out through his teeth. Whatever. I picked the lot with my own hand. How can I go back on my words now? All the girls were anxious after hearing Xixia's reply. They all wanted Liang Lihua to arrange for a redraw. Liang Lihua glanced at Yuan's unpleasant appearance, pondered for a moment, then said, Class, please be quiet. I have already mentioned that to be fair, we will go according to the outcome of the draw. Since even Xixia doesn't mind, then the female lead is set, and no one's allowed to talk about it any further. Right now the concern was not if Yuan would cause trouble, but instead, it was a matter of when. With that thought, Liang Lihua turned to Yuan and warned, the performance this time is very important. If you mess up, even I won't be able to help you. Only then did Yuan wake up. How did she manage to be chosen to play Snow White and become a thorn to the other girls just by taking a nap? The Yuan from before had been captured by Han due to that love letter at this point, so she hadn't had to deal with this before and was completely caught off guard. If I had known sooner, I would definitely have stopped it from happening. With Han's possessiveness and jealousy, if he finds out that I will be playing a role as someone else's lover and that there is even a kissing scene at the end, isn't this considered cheating? Damn, how did I get tangled up in this while doing nothing? Yuan grabbed her hair in distress and almost broke down. Seeing his partner Yuan reacting like that, Xixia's face turned black. Who exactly was the one who got tangled up in this beyond their control? Is this woman actually acting like she's the unlucky one? Wait, miss, may I give this role up? Yuan quickly raised her hand. Upon hearing that, the girls were immediately enraged again. What? Yuan, the ugly freak. Our hunk hasn't even abandoned her, yet she dares to leave the play. Liang Lihua's face filled with fury instantly. Yuan, how dare you treat the school as your own home? Doing whatever you please? Without any rules? Don't forget that you're still on probation. Yuan muttered a curse after Liang Lihua threatened her. Damn. At that moment, the boy next to her could not hold it in any longer. Yuan. Exactly who is the person who was damned? Yuan looked skeptically at the school's hunk who was about to explode in anger because of her. Resting her chin on her hands, she muttered in utter distress, but I have a boyfriend. If my boyfriend finds out and gets jealous, then what should I do? I'm at a loss here, okay? Xixia stared at Yuan's face, that face that could blacken the heart with just one look, and was silenced immediately. This woman has a boyfriend. Her boyfriend must be blind. Chapter 37. The Great Devil has arrived. After school, Yuan sighed on her way back to the hostel. My relationship with Han has just been stabilized. How could this happen now? She was still on probation, so she couldn't simply reject the role. The only way would be to force Xixia to request a substitution. I'll give him a surprise tomorrow. The makeup stowed under my chest hasn't been taken out yet. Yuan strategized while bringing her clothes to the bathroom. After removing her makeup and taking a hot bath, she felt like a brand new person. Wow, who is that beauty I see? Turns out to be the reflection of myself, What is that cold thing pressing onto my neck? My gold necklace is worth more than $2,000. I thank God daily. Every day I am filled with gratitude in my heart. When I wake up, I can't help but love myself. Yes, I do not need anybody else. Yuan hummed to the song, blew her hair dry, and stretched her arms to push the bathroom door open. An attractive lady like me, a cute lady like me, people wooing me could line up all the way to the Milky Way. Yeah. The moment she pushed the door open, Yuan's expression froze immediately. On the cheaply lacquered chair beside her desk was a man sitting there. The man was leaning his forehead to the side lazily, his white slender finger holding the test paper that she received today. As always, he had on a black suit darker than the night sky. The neckline of dark silver stripes glowed with a cold luster, and his deep eyes looked as if they had been submerged in a pool of ice for years, with no trace of humanity. Her ordinary female hostel suddenly became an 18-story hell with hundreds of ghosts, whistling, and the chair that the man was sitting on was no longer the same cheaply lacquered chair, but a dragon king throne wrapped with a black giant python. Si Han. Bang Yuan slammed the bathroom door hard. It must have been the way I opened the door. How could it have become hell in a moment? 1 second went by. 2 seconds went by. 3 seconds went by. Yuan's heart was beating hard, her blood flowing the opposite direction, and her mind was completely blank. After a full minute, she finally eased her mind slightly and carefully opened the bathroom door a little. In the end, she was scared out of her wits with just one look. Not only was Si Han still there, but he became scarier after seeing that she slammed the door in fear. The whole hostel was frozen by that pair of cold and dark eyes. She could even see the bright blue flames from the great devil's head. Help out of instinct for survival, and due to the fear penetrating into her bones, Yuan's first reaction was to run in the direction of the doorway. However, just as her fingers curled around the lock, she regained her senses under her immense fear. She couldn't run. Damn, what should I do now? Beads of sweat were trickling down Yuan's forehead, and her mind was racing. Quickly, she turned the lock in the other direction and locked the door instead. After taking a deep breath discreetly, Yuan suppressed the fear in her eyes. Then, she turned around and walked towards Si Han. Under that man's glare that could almost freeze human bones, Yuan stopped in front of him. She sat on his lap, hooked her arms around his neck, and kissed his ice-cold lips. Chapter 38. A rewarding kiss. The girl's freshly bathed body exuded a natural fragrance. Her soft and sweet lips were as wonderful as cotton candy. The violent and raging beast in the man's body was appeased almost instantaneously, submitting to the girl's most vulnerable and unguarded kisses on the neck. Aware of the sharp change in atmosphere around Si Han, Yuan's guard was finally lowered slightly. Although I rushed to the door, it looks like I wasn't trying to escape, but merely locking the door to make out with him. He won't be angry about this, right? Darling, why are you here? Yuan tried her best to sound pleasantly surprised. Si Han looked at her in silence, not saying a single word. His icy cold pupils seemed to penetrate through her soul. Yuan felt a little guilty. Can he see through my act? After a long while, the man's narrow lips moved delicately. People who are wooing you could queue all the way to the Milky Way? Yuan took a long time to react. When she did, she realized that Si Han was referring to the lyrics of the song she had sung just now. Yuan broke out in a cold sweat. No, those were just song lyrics. Queue to the Milky Way, my ass. More like stuffed into 18 levels of hell. Would those who dared to court me still see daylight tomorrow? Wrong. The point is, who would court me when there isn't even a fly by my side? By the way, I topped the class for the exams this time. Full marks for language, English, and liberal arts. Yuan changed the topic. Si Han's fingers gently coiled a wisp of hair around her ear and replied lazily, HM. He spoke in a very natural tone with no surprise or doubt, as if achieving these results were normal for her. Thinking of all the countless doubts she experienced today, the reaction of Si Han now made her heart go through inexplicable feelings. Surprisingly, the only person who believed in her was Si Han. Si Han saw that Yuan Wan was in a daze and looked dejected. His slender fingers suddenly pinched the girl's lips and kissed them lightly under her stunned eyes. You did very well. Yuan Wan blinked and blinked again. Was that a reward? What did I do to let Si Han think that I was seeking a kiss as a reward? Forget it, as long as the king is happy. At this moment, Yuan Wan suddenly recalled that this was a girl's hostel. How did he get in? Wrong. The point is, when will he be leaving? After all, the hostel may be checked by someone anytime, and if she was found to be hiding a man. Just as Yuan Wan was racking her brain on how to convince Si Han to leave, his gaze fell upon her empty little bed and suddenly asked, "Where's the blanket?" Blanket? Yuan Wan was stunned for a moment and then instinctively replied, "I aired it outside today and haven't brought it back. I'll go and get it." The man nodded slightly. Yuan Wan didn't understand why Si Han suddenly asked about the blanket. Confused, she ran to the balcony to collect it. She arranged the bedding properly and patted the pillow, huffing and blowing. After airing out the blanket and pillow, they were fluffy and soft and radiating with the smell of sunshine, which she found very satisfying. The man looked at them with satisfaction. Then his long legs moved and he laid down on her bed. "Help me set an alarm for 2 hours from now." Yuan Wan was flabbergasted as she looked at the man lying on her bed, ready to sleep. Si Han actually wants to sleep here. Chapter 39. It's so soft and comfortable here. Her small bed was lined with the school's tacky blue and white striped sheets. She found the school's blanket quite uncomfortable, so she bought a new one at the small supermarket opposite the school. It was much softer, but the big blossoming peonies imprinted on it were very conspicuous. And right now, Si Han was lying on that little bed that didn't match him, with a peony-printed blanket over his body. Yuan Wan strangely found that with him lying there, the gaudy peony flowers now appeared quite elegant. "Hey, are you sleeping here? Come over." The man didn't answer her question but beckoned her over instead. "Oh." Yuan Wan swallowed hard and walked over obediently. Then, she was pulled into his embrace and they laid down together. Yuan Wan. Not only is he sleeping over, but he's forcing me to sleep with him. What is he trying to do? There were sounds of people walking back and forth and girls laughing and talking merrily outside. With Yuan Wan's heart in her mouth, she hurriedly attempted to persuade him. "Hey, my bed is very hard, so it's really uncomfortable to sleep in. If you're sleepy, would you like to go back to rest?" The man hugged her in his arms. "But it's so soft and comfortable here." Yuan Wan's face turned glum. Is he talking about the bed or me? "Ninth Master, are you sure you don't want to go back to rest? It's so noisy here, and the bed is tiny. It can't even fit your legs, and you can't fall asleep without Dr. Mo. Also, Yuan Wan spoke so much, but he didn't show the slightest intention of leaving. Yuan Wan finally shut her mouth in annoyance. But once she stopped talking, he opened his eyes again and said in a low voice, "Talk?" Yuan Wan didn't understand. "Huh? Si Han. Continue talking." Yuan Wan. "He needs to listen to my voice just to sleep. Does he have to be so difficult?" Yuan Wan wanted to throw the blanket off in frustration, but of course, she didn't have the guts. She nodded and mumbled, "Oh, but what should I talk about?" "Well, I'll recite the numbers of pi. Okay?" Yuan Wan tried asking. He nodded, indicating his assent. Thus, Yuan Wan started reciting 3, 1415926535897. Pi is an infinite decimal. It said that one could recite up to 100,000 digits for more than 10 consecutive hours. Yuan Wan had never counted how many digits she could recite, and anyway, as long as Si Han didn't tell her to stop, she wouldn't dare to stop and could only keep reciting the numbers. The man lying next to her looked so charming that he could brighten the entire sky of Qinghe. His hair looked as if it was dyed black by the night sky. His facial features were chiseled. His skin was flawlessly perfect. His thin lips were thin yet extremely nice. Each individual strand of hair showed the extreme favor of the Creator, and especially since he loosened the tie on his collar, exposing a section of his clavicle. Aside from feeling fearful, Yuan Wan found that lying next to such a perfect being was really torturous. Yuan Wan didn't know how long to recite for. In the end, she was so tired that she fell asleep unknowingly. Finally, she was awoken in shock by a knock on the door. Dong dong dong. The knocks were very loud in the quiet room. Damn, whatever it was, here it comes. Yi Wanwan rolled out of bed like a frightened bird. The man next to her seemed to be sleeping soundly before the knocking. His attractive eyebrows then furrowed slightly with sullenness at the sound of the knocking. Yi Wanwan was slightly surprised. Si Han actually fell asleep again? Didn't he have a hard time falling asleep to the point where he needed Dr. Mo's hypnotism every time? However, she didn't care so much now and gently nudged the person next to her quickly. Si Han, wake up. Chapter 40. 2 Kisses. Of course, she knew how angry Si Han was each time he woke up, but she couldn't care less now. Si Han, there's someone at the door. Can you hide for a while? Certainly. After he heard what she said, the great devil's expression became so ferocious that it looked as if it could destroy Earth. Yi Wanwan placed her palms together and pleaded sincerely, "Please, please." His face remained angry and gloomy. Yi Wanwan leaned over and kissed the guy on his lips. All right? The girl's eyes were moist and her voice was tender and so soft that it could melt a person's heart. Si Han's anger seemed to be put out in an instant. However, his expression was still frozen. Oh, this woman. She thinks that I am so easily appeased? Watching Si Han's frozen and indifferent facial expression, Yi Wanwan anxiously leaned over and gave him another kiss. I'm begging you. Si Han. All right. Yi Wanwan's face immediately lit up in appreciation. Thank you. Just hide in the bathroom for a moment. I'll be done real quick. If there's anything that can't be solved with a kiss, 2 kisses will suffice. Only after Si Han was hidden did Yi Wanwan open the door. The person at the door was Shun Mengqi. Looking at Yi Wanwan's current state, Shun Mengqi was stunned. She saw a girl with no makeup in an ordinary sleeping gown, but she looked as fresh as a lovely lily that had just sprung into blossom from the water. She was so beautiful that she couldn't peel her eyes away. Although she already knew that Yi Wanwan looked great after she slimmed down, she hadn't seen her original looks for quite some time, so now she was taken aback. Shin Mengqi was also recognized in school as a beauty and definitely the beauty of Class A. But standing before Yi Wanwan now, even if she put in a maximum amount of effort, she would only be 1/10 of the beauty of Yi Wanwan in her casual pajamas. Shin Mengqi's expression was hard to read, and she seemed to be losing her cool. She tried hard to talk with her usual intimate tone and said sweetly, Wanwan, what took you so long to open the door? Was asleep? But it's only around 8. You're asleep so early. Shin Mengqi responded in surprise. It's so late. Do you have something for me? Yi Wanwan asked. I'm obviously here to chit-chat with you. Don't stand at the door. Let's talk in the room. Shin Mengqi didn't linger any longer and invited herself in. Yi Wanwan furrowed her brows. Before she was reborn, she couldn't wait to have Shin Mengqi to come over for some chit-chat. Each time she'd try to get Shin Mengqi to chat till midnight. If she stopped her from coming in this time, it would seem like she was trying to hide something, and so she let her in. If she had known it was Shin Mengqi at the door, it wouldn't have mattered even if she saw Si Han. But this time, Shin Mengqi didn't know that Si Han was around, which was even better. Yi Wanwan rolled her eyes while planning secretly. This mischief-maker, Shun Mengqi, was a traitor by her side. She was too much of a hindrance, and it was about time to remove her. After entering the room, as if to deliberately trigger Shun Mengqi, Yi Wanwan took out a small mirror and constantly checked herself out smugly. Shin Mengqi's face changed after seeing that. She stared at Yi Wanwan sternly and scolded, Wanwan, you're too careless. Why'd you go to the door without makeup? What if the person outside wasn't me? It'd be bad if someone knew your true appearance. The eyes and ears of Si Han are everywhere. You can't take it lightly even in school. Chapter 41. Is it my fault for looking this good? Yi Wanwan admired her reflection in the mirror, that little face that looked good at every angle. She glanced sideways at Shin Mengqi. Is it my fault for looking this good? Shin Mengqi was speechless for a moment. That wasn't what I meant. I was just reminding you to be cautious. You've tolerated things for so long. Don't give up everything now. After all, that devil had finally lost interest in you and allowed you to leave Jean Garden. If he saw how good-looking you are and didn't give up on you, what would you do? Ho ho, great devil. Yi Wanwan listened to Shin Ming-chi's words, held her chin and muttered. Si Han didn't mind my appearance even when I looked so atrocious. Maybe he truly loves me? Shin Ming-chi immediately blurted out, how could that be? He's a great devil who kills with no emotions. He especially likes torturing women. A total pervert. You were just unlucky to be the chosen one. Have you forgotten how he treated you these 2 years? Yi Wanwan nodded. Oh, then, she wasn't sure how Si Han would feel after hearing Shin Ming-chi's criticism. The Shin Ming-chi in the past could successfully put a wedge between them each time because Si Han trusted her and even thought that she was on his side. Due to her relationship with Si Han, Shin Ming-chi had benefited quite a bit. She was very popular in entertainment circles and later, the whole Shun family shared the spotlight as well. Moving from being a small company to becoming part of the A-lister crowd meant a leap into the royal family. Now all Yi Wanwan wanted to do was destroy the trust that Si Han had for Shin Ming-chi. She's trying to undermine my relationship with Si Han? Fat chance. Shin Ming-chi was afraid that Yi Wanwan was starting to fall for Si Han. So she hurriedly pulled out her trump card, Gu Yuze. Wanwan, are you still mad at Mr. Gu? To be fair, it wasn't Mr. Gu's fault that other time. You were too rash. If you ran away with Mr. Gu that time and explained that you had been forced to be at Jean Garden, you guys might just be together by now. But you threw your tantrum in the end and refused to leave with him. All my efforts were wasted in helping you contact Mr. Gu and distracting the servants in Jean Garden. Yi Wanwan listened, sighed, and pretended to speak with great emotion. Ming-chi, I know that your heart was broken for me. You helped me come up with the idea to dress atrociously to hide from Si Han. It was you who's been trying to help me escape, and it was also you who helped me pass messages on to Gu Yuze. Shin Ming-chi saw that Yi Wanwan was still so foolish. Shin Ming-chi had a look of mockery in her eyes, but her sincere face remained. Wanwan, you're my best friend. If I don't help you, who would? So listen to me, don't be at odds with Mr. Gu anymore. It was so hard for you to leave Jean Garden. You should take this chance to find Mr. Gu. Otherwise, if this goes on, when are you ever going to get Mr. Gu back? Yi Wanwan managed to pry out everything she wanted Si Han to hear and was finally satisfied. She maintained her composure, looked in the direction of the bathroom, and then slowly replied, Who said that I wanted to get him back? Shin Ming-chi was shocked at what she heard and furrowed her brows. Mr. Gu was obviously your fiancé, but was stolen away by your cousin. Of course you have to get him back. Are you going to give up just like that? How could you? Wouldn't that be letting Yi off easy? Yi Wanwan smiled wryly at how anxious Shin Ming-chi was. She touched her own features tenderly in the mirror and said faintly, Getting back a tattered and unwanted pair of shoes? Is that necessary? If Yi thinks she has gotten the upper hand, then let her be. Chapter 42. Stay with me for 6 hours, tattered shoes. Shin Ming-chi's eyes were wide open. She would never have imagined Yi Wanwan saying such a thing. Gu Yuze was akin to a god to Yi Wanwan. Nobody was allowed to say anything bad about him around her. Shin Ming-chi's heart was full of surprise and doubt, so she kept staring at her. Wanwan, you? How could you say something like that about Mr. Gu? Yi was to blame for everything. Her father snatched the Yi family away, and she shamelessly snatched your fiancé. Mr. Gu didn't have a choice. What happened exactly? Why do you think this way all of a sudden? With Wanwan's undying love for Gu Yuze, to the point of even cutting ties with her parents, how could she give up just like that? Yi Wanwan simply replied, Nothing much, I've just thought things through. Shin Ming-chi hurriedly tried to convince her, Wanwan, don't be impulsive. You've had feelings for him for so many years after all. Yi Wanwan yawned, obviously not interested in continuing this topic, and interrupted, I'm tired. It's time to sleep. I'll chat with you again next time. Shin Ming-chi wanted to say more, but Yi Wanwan was already lying in bed yawning, so she could only leave. Why do I get the sense that after Yi Wanwan returned to school, something's changed? In the past, she said everything she thought, but now, she's much more controlled and even her attitudes become more nonchalant. After she was sure that Shin Ming-chi was gone, Yi Wanwan got up and walked to the bathroom. The conversation she had with Shun Mingqi just now probably allowed her to achieve half of her objective. Of course, she wanted to take this chance to express her heartfelt feelings towards Si Han, but with Si Han's cunning, he'd think that she was aware he was around, so she said all those things deliberately for him to hear. So she wouldn't insist that he believes her. As long as he heard everything that Shin Mingqi said just now, that would suffice. Yi Wanwan pulled open the bathroom door and quickly invited the great devil out. Sorry. That person is gone. It was Mingqi. I thought it'd be the dormitory in charge making his rounds. It gave me quite a scare. When Yi Wanwan opened the door, Si Han's tall body was leaning against the basin. In the basket beside it was the pile of clothes that she'd washed, and at the very top was her strawberry-printed bra. Yi Wanwan was instantly embarrassed, so she quickly took a towel and covered it. Then, she observed Si Han's expression. However, an ordinary person like her wouldn't be able to decipher his thoughts so easily. There was no expression on the man's face, and she couldn't tell what he was thinking about. Si Han looked at her for a few seconds, then he caressed the delicate jaws of the girl with his fingers, his low voice lingering in the narrow washroom. 6 hours and then I'll forgive you. What's 6 hours? Yi Wanwan didn't understand. Si Han. Sleep with me? Yi Wanwan, why is this different from what I expected? Chapter 43. The literal meaning, please. Yi Wanwan's little heart was startled. Sleep? What do you mean sleep? Literally. Or, the man looked at her. If you want it to mean something else, that's fine too. Yi Wanwan immediately shook her head vigorously. No, the literal meaning is fine. But even if it was simply sleeping, that alone gave her a headache. Just 2 hours of sleeping with him had caused her to be jumpy, much less 6 hours. But she was in the wrong. In the end, she could only bite the bullet and agree. When she was lying in bed accompanying him again, Yi Wanwan suddenly realized that maybe Si Han dug a pit for her to jump into on purpose, so that she had to obediently agree to such an unfair contract since she was in the wrong. Also, after hearing the conversation just now, why didn't Si Han have any reaction at all? It couldn't be that he didn't hear anything, right? Her head hurt from thinking. When she turned her head, she realized that he was sleeping soundly. Could it be that she was wrong all along? Si Han's sleeping pattern seemed to be very normal. He didn't look like a sick person. Yi Wanwan was still entertaining her foolish thoughts and couldn't fall asleep. Finally, she was infected by Si Han's drowsiness and fell asleep unknowingly. Late at night, the man on the bed opened his eyes lazily like a satisfied beast. But even after just waking up, his pupils were still fierce and cold. Until he suddenly felt something unusually soft in his embrace, and his fierce expression relaxed, and he lowered his head to look. Under the warm glow of the moonlight, he saw a girl snuggling in his arms like a little kitten, sleeping soundly. For a moment, his cold, empty chest was suddenly filled and his suspended heart returned to his body. The man's arms tightened, but since he was afraid he'd wake the girl in his arms, he quickly relaxed. He stared at the person in his embrace with a complex look on his face. Ever since that night, she became more and more difficult to figure out. Although he liked the change, the intoxicating sweetness was too unreal, causing him to feel uneasy. It was like he was a traveler who had walked in the desert for too long and suddenly saw an oasis. In the next second, he might find out that this was all just an illusion, a transient glimmer of hope. At that moment, the phone by his side started flashing, indicating a new message. Si Han's eyes turned dark and opened the message. The sender was Shen Mingqi. Mr. C. I went to visit Yi Wanwan last night and tried very hard to convince her. However, she still seemed to be mad at you. Mr. Gu was her fiancé after all, so it's understandable that she's unable to get over him so quickly. I believe that one day she'll realize that you're good for her. Chapter 44. The relationship between us. Sui waited in the car for more than 6 hours before his master finally appeared. More than 6 hours. What was he doing? Sui naturally didn't dare to probe, and he quickly opened the door of the back seat. In the car, Sui couldn't help but examine the man sitting at the back through the rearview mirror. Si Han supported his forehead with a finger, his handsome face coated with a layer of frost that was reflected on the black window of the car. Master's complexion looked much better than before, but his expression didn't bode well. Good complexion yet bad expression? So what did the master experience in those 6 hours? After the love letter incident, things seemed quite peaceful between the two of them. Thinking about the love letter, Sui immediately frowned. After much hesitating, he couldn't help but ask, "Master, are you sure you want to keep that Shinmengqi around?" He had already checked this woman's background. Her father was the boss of a small company and had little business dealings with the Yi family. Initially, Shinmengqi got close to Yi Wanwan and her brother because Mr. Shan incited it, just so he could have a closer relationship with Yi Xiaoting. Shinmengqi didn't let him down. She gained the trust of Yi Wanwan and even settled things with Yi Mu Fan. Seeing that Si Han wasn't replying, Sui hesitated for a moment and continued. This girl has bad intentions for staying by Ms. Ye's side. She deliberately interfered with the relationship between you and Ms. Yi. Do you really want such a person to continue being by Ms. Ye's side? Although she's just a little girl, nothing to be afraid of, her influence on Ms. Yi is too great. Si Han listened and his gaze slowly turned icy and shot a razor-sharp look forward. You think that the relationship between us could be ended by just anybody? Suyi's back stiffened from that cold glare, and he wished he could cry to the heavens. Exaggeration much? Master, where'd you get the confidence to actually think that your relationship with Ms. Yi is strong? Too bad he didn't have the guts to say all these things. In the quiet of the back seat, the man's face kept changing in the darkness. After some time, he finally closed his eyes and suppressed the almost uncontrollable rage to kill. Seeing this, Sui understood in his heart. Shinmengqi was Yi Wanwan's only support after all. Yi Wanwan had such a stubborn temperament, but was willing to submit to the master and plead for his help on Shanmengqi's behalf. Previously, she even starved for 3 days to allow Shanmengqi to freely enter and leave Jin Garden. If master laid a hand on Shinmengqi, that would just cause a world war. Although Shinmengqi had some ill intentions, her role was irreplaceable. If not for Shinmengqi, that Yi Wanwan would have run away so many times. Actually, he still didn't quite understand why his master was so attached to Yi Wanwan. Could it be because she was unattainable? Right now, I can only wish that Yi Wanwan straightens out her thinking. This way, even with Shinmengqi's troublemaking, it won't be a problem. Wasn't that the case for the love letter incident previously? Maybe after master finally gets this girl, he'll realize that there was nothing special about her after all. Chapter 45. Falling for Xia? The next morning, when Yi Wanwan woke up, Si Han was no longer around, and she didn't know what time he had left. He truly comes and goes like a shadow. Thinking about what happened last night, Yi Wanwan felt quite disheartened. Maybe Si Han didn't care about what Shinmengqi had said, and he simply planted her next to Yi Wanwan to monitor her? Looks like I need to be more careful and prevent Shinmengqi from getting the upper hand. The good thing was that she knew Shinmengqi's true colors and would no longer be brainwashed by her. It wouldn't be so easy for Shinmengqi to cause trouble for her again. She would slowly let Si Han know that his informant had lost its effectiveness. After she thought that through, Yi Wanwan was relieved and got up to get ready for the day. The green wig and body tattoos were back in business. Wearing a t-shirt studded with sequins, distressed pants with more than 10 holes complete with gothic makeup, her look stood out. The amount of head turns she received also proved her shocking appearance. On the way to the canteen, she bumped into Shanmengqi. "Wanwan, I was about to find you. Let's have breakfast together." Shinmengqi immediately hooked arms with her intimately. Looking at Yi Wanwan's look, Shinmengqi's eyes lit up and appeared to be very satisfied. Seems like Yi Wanwan did listen to what I said last night. When they arrived at the canteen, all the students around them were watching and whispering. Look. Yi Wanwan brought her ugliness to the next level again. Mengqi's too kinda still be with that ugly freak. These two people standing together reminds me of the Beauty and the Beast. Stop saying that, you guys. This ugly freak is still here not only because she topped the class, she even surpassed class beauty Cheng Shui and art committee member Han Xiaoru to be Xia's partner in the play. Damn. For real? This ugly freak is so scheming. Don't tell me she's obsessed with my dream guy. Hearing the discussion around them, Shen Mengqi's eyes brightened. Could it be that Yi Wanwan had no more feelings for Gu Yuzhe all of a sudden, because of Xixia? Shen Mengqi said with a laugh, "Oh yes, Wanwan, I haven't congratulated you. I heard that you topped the class for this exam." In front of Yi Wanwan was a large bowl of sweet potato purple rice porridge, 2 big meat buns, and a crepe with 3 pieces of meat, 2 eggs, a ham sausage, and fruit. She replied casually while eating, "Well, it was just a test. No biggie." Shen Mengqi knew that Yi Wanwan had a strong memory, but after she found out she topped the class, she was still very surprised. "Didn't you say that you hate studying? Why are you working so hard all of a sudden?" Yi Wanwan took a bite of her bun. "I do hate it. I hate everything that's not challenging." Shen Mengqi's face turned dark and almost choked on her food by that remark. She studied so hard every single day to stay within the top 10 in class. She was only 3rd in class with her best efforts. This time, she didn't maintain her position and fell to 9th place. But Yi Wanwan actually topped the class so effortlessly? Shen Mengqi suppressed the dissatisfaction in her heart. So what if you have good grades? The Yi family's no longer the same Yi family that belonged to Yi Xiaoting, and Yi Wanwan's no longer that glamorous rich family's daughter. The Yi Wanwan now isn't even worthy of carrying my shoes. Then what's with you and Xixia? Did you fall for Xixia? Shen Mengqi finally reached the topic she was dying to know about. After all, Yi Wanwan shared a desk with Xixia before. Could it be that during that period, Yi Wanwan started to develop feelings for Xixia? Yi Wanwan squinted her eyes slightly after hearing that. "It seems like I have to settle the issue with Xixia quickly, otherwise, Shen Mengqi will use it for an essay." "I'm not interested," Yi Wanwan replied nonchalantly. Chapter 46. Not even a tenth as dashing as you after breakfast, Yi Wanwan walked towards the classroom. She was still over 10 steps away from the classroom door when Yi Wanwan saw some heads popping out of the windows to look around. Having seen her, those heads seemed surprised and popped back in. There was a commotion coming from the class. Then, a sudden strange silence. Yi Wanwan stood 3 steps away from the classroom door, and just as she was about to continue walking, she suddenly stopped and her eyes glanced at the doorframe over her head. As she paused, there was total silence in the classroom, as if they were all anticipating a grand entrance. She was so unlucky the day before to land herself in big trouble with her classmates. If these people didn't pull a prank on her, she'd be surprised. Yi Wanwan wasn't nervous at all. She just continued to stand by the door. After some time, sure enough, some unrestrained heads peeked out to check and then, quickly and carefully went back in. Shortly after, the school bell rang, indicating the start of lessons. The man behind her said in a shock, "Oh damn, you gave me a scare." "Oh, it's you." Yi Wanwan. Zhao Xingzhou was holding a math book in his hand, with another hand clutching his chest. He stared at her face alarmed, looking like he had a bad scare. "It's almost time for class. Why are you still standing at the door?" "I was thinking about my life for a bit." "After you, teacher." Yi Wanwan politely took a step back. Zhao Xingzhou appreciated her good attitude. Feeling remorseful now for scoring 0 in math? Zhao Xingzhou spoke while pushing the classroom door open. The next second, a loud crash resounded as a large bucket of water splashed down right on Zhao Xingzhou's face. He was immediately soaked through like a drowned rat. Zhao Xingzhou was stunned for a second and then blew up. Damn. I just styled my hair this morning. Which brat did this? I want a confession now." A sigh of disappointment came from the classroom first, then many of them started panicking. Damn. Why was the math teacher the one who pushed the door open? We're screwed. Everyone in F class knew that you could offend the form teacher, but you should never offend this teacher who seemed cheery and easygoing, otherwise, you'd be tortured to death. Zhao Xingzhou wiped the water off his face. "Nobody's confessing? Once I find out myself, then you'll be in very deep trouble." After a very long time, finally, 3 girls and a boy stood up cowering. "Follow me to the office, the 4 of you." When they passed Yi Wanwan, Zhao Xingzhou glared at her for a few seconds with a veiled bitterness. Yi Wanwan blinked her eyes and looked around innocently. After Zhao Xingzhou dragged those troublemakers away, Yuan walked straight to the seat next to Xia under all the hateful stares from the girls and sat down. Since they had rehearsal after class, Xia was wearing a British uniform with bright white bottoms and edges lined in gold. The restrictive neckline was fastened all the way up to the first button, quite in line with his character as a prince in the play. He also had that superior temperament and lofty arrogance he was born with. But it was no wonder, after all, since he was the only grandchild in the C family and was severely doted on. Nobody could ignore him. Of course, this didn't include Yuan. The moment he saw Yuan, the boy's dazzling face turned green. Yuan didn't have time to bother with him and quickly took the chance to send some texts to Xia while the teacher wasn't around. She had to act before Shinming Qi did. Xia had a hard time recovering from that earth-shattering fright, and then he saw Yuan texting away. He peered at what she was typing. "Darling, the school will be organizing an art performance, and I was picked to be Snow White. Hee, aren't I amazing? A pity that the prince acting with me is so ugly, not even a tenth as dashing as you." Chapter 47. Never seen him smile after reading Yuan's text message. Xia suddenly had a mouthful of blood in his throat, almost choking him to death. Ever since he was little, all the stars circled around his moon wherever he went. He had never experienced such slander. If this ugly girl wanted his attention, she had succeeded. "Oh, ugly." Hearing the voice next to her, Yuan realized that the contents of her text message had been exposed. But she didn't feel bad at all. She held onto her phone, smiled, and turned to the livid boy. "You don't have to feel inferior. Actually, you don't look too bad. You're just lacking in comparison to my boyfriend." Xia wouldn't have ever dreamed of asking her to bring her boyfriend out for a comparison. He just took a deep breath and closed his eyes to rest. He might just die from anger if he continued speaking to this moron. Yuan curled her lips. "Tsk, he doesn't believe me." At the same time, in the old house of the C family, Xia had just completed a checkup. Other than Immerse, there was a senior doctor at the scene too. Sitting next to Xia was a 70 or 80-year-old woman. The old lady had a head full of silver hair, twirling a string of beads in her hand, and was staring sadly at her grandson at that moment. The senior doctor took Xi's pulse, his facial expression becoming more and more dreary. The old woman saw the doctor's gloomy expression and became even more sullen. But Xi sat on the sofa and drank his tea without any expression after having his pulse taken. He seemed indifferent to his own health. The old lady asked anxiously, "Dr. Mo, Dr. Sun, please tell me truthfully without beating around the bush. How's little Nine teaches health?" Immerse glanced at Xi, sighed and didn't say anything. The old lady glared at him immediately. "Why were you looking at him? I asked you a question." Immerse weighed his words and then answered, "He's still the same." The old lady grunted, "Don't try to fool me. You told me he only slept for a few hours yesterday, a few hours the day before, and the day before yesterday as well." Immerse had no choice but to reply, "The day before yesterday, hypnotism failed, and the day before, it also failed. As for last night, Mr. C came back to Jean Garden around 3 in the morning, so I wasn't able to give him any treatment." The old lady's face changed abruptly. 3 days? No sleep for 3 days again? Immerse didn't dare tell her that Xi's sleep had been quite terrible for the whole week. He had predicted that he would have been at his limit yesterday and was worried that there would be a big problem with his body. He was a little surprised seeing that Xi's condition was not as bad as he imagined. The senior doctor sighed and said, "Madam, I won't hide it from you. These 2 years, Ninth young master's health has been deteriorating. His sleeping disorder is increasingly affecting his temperament, and if we don't find an effective cure soon, I'm afraid." The old lady was instantly provoked by the unsaid words after afraid. "What's the use if I understand? Both of you should be thinking of a cure. Aren't the two of you top-notch doctors? Yet both of you can't solve a small case of insomnia?" Immerse looked helpless. "Madam, Ninth Master's problem is psychological. Whenever he's in a good mood, he's able to sleep more. Whenever he's troubled, he won't be able to sleep for even a minute." The old lady raged. "Then think of something to help elevate his mood." Immerse smiled bitterly and thought in his heart, You know how bad your grandson's temperament is? Elevate his mood? Easier said than done. Truthfully, after being by this master's side for so long, I have never even seen him smile, all right? Just when the atmosphere in the living room was getting more and more tense, the cold and indifferent Ce Han sitting on the sofa glanced at his phone and let out a little laugh. Oh. Chapter 48. Ninth Master, in Love? Immerse had just completed his thought and then he saw the gentleman with a complete lack of human emotion smiling. It wasn't a dark and foreboding laughter, nor a ruthless and dreadful scoff, but it was actual, normal, unbelievably joyful laughter. In that instant, it was as if an icy mountain thousands of miles away had melted. If the Ce Han with a cold expression was already very good-looking, then the smiling Ce Han could even turn a man gay. Other than Immerse, the one who was most surprised was the old lady. The old lady shuddered and her eyes turned red. She hasn't seen Little Ninth smile for a very, very long time. Little Ninth, what are you looking at? Why were you so happy? The old lady was nervous and asked carefully, afraid that what she saw was just a hallucination. Ce Han's face was still a warm color, and even his tone was gentler than usual. Text from my girlfriend. The old lady was stunned at first and had a look of surprise. Girlfriend? Little Ninth, you have a girlfriend? No wonder. No wonder you look different somehow. You're actually in love. What kind of girl is she? How old? What does she work as? What does her family do? What's her name? Immerse, who was standing at the side, was stunned after what Ce Han said. Girlfriend? He wasn't referring to that mentally unstable woman called Yuan. Was he? Ce Han tapped his phone with his slender fingers. Yuan. Immerse. He was. The old lady nodded her head seriously. Yuan? That's a nice name. You cheeky boy, how could you keep this from Grandma? Grandma's been eagerly waiting for you to settle down and have a girl to take care of you. All those other girls around you are so unsophisticated and boorish. How can they take care of you? Hurry and bring that girl back for Grandma to see. Ce Han was indeed in a good mood and didn't reject. I will check with her. The old lady was delighted beyond measure. Excellent. Do ask her nicely, all right? Don't scare her away. Just a casual meet-up. It doesn't have to be too uptight. What does Yuan like to eat? Does she have a preference? I'll get the kitchen to prepare everything in advance. There was a slight warmth in his eyes. She's not picky. She likes to eat everything. Not picky about food, very good. After she found out that her grandchild was dating, the old lady's spirits were lifted and she couldn't sit still. She made herself busy, asking all the servants to prepare everything well and instructing the kitchen staff to buy the ingredients in advance. After she was done, she got someone to send Sui over. Madam, did you ask for me? Sui asked nervously. The old lady was unsatisfied. Explain yourself. You're always by Little Ninth's side, yet you don't even know that he's in love? Ninth Master, in love? Sui was dumbfounded. Seeing his reaction, the old lady got madder. It's that Yuan girl, Little Ninth told me himself just now. Yuan. Sui was dumbfounded. Yuan, of course I know her. This woman has been with Ninth Master for almost 2 years. But strictly speaking, it was Ninth Master who unilaterally forced her, right? Two people who can't even sleep on the same bed. Can this be called love? Anyway, didn't Ninth Master strictly forbid them from gossiping and bringing up Yuan in front of others? Chapter 49. As if he was the one about to be abused after school, the rehearsal was held at the small auditorium in school. In addition to some actors, there were a few die-hard fans of Xixia and bodyguards there too. Cheng Shui led a group of blushing girls who swooned around Xixia. They showed great concern about him and even comforted him since he was traumatized with the knowledge that he'd have to partner up with Yuan. That teacher was too much. How could she simply draw lots to decide? Exactly. She actually allowed Yuan to perform. What an insult to Xixia. Xixia, don't be upset. Why don't we go to the teacher and protest together? Yuan was sucking on a lollipop at the door, listening to everything these girls were saying, and the edges of her mouth curled up. Why did these girls make it look like Xia was the one about to be abused? His ears filled with the girls' chatter. Xia looked more and more icy, his forehead full of annoyance. Just as he was about to speak, an immediate silence fell upon the area. Looking at the door, sure enough, he saw that Yuan Wan was standing there. Once Yuan Wan appeared, she aroused the fury of the girls in an instant, and some girls stormed towards her. Yuan Wan, do you have no shame? You really came. We have a score to settle with you for what happened this morning. You stole our little Schwez roll and still you act so cocky. You really think we can't touch you? Yuan Wan scanned the 3 girls who came up to her. These 3 people were the ones who plotted the prank, but the boy wasn't with them, probably because he had to bear full responsibility and was still being dealt with by Zhao Xingzhou. These 3 girls were part of Cheng Shui's gang, and that boy was like a big brother to Cheng Shui in school. They were quite powerful in Qinghe, and nobody dared to offend these school bullies. This time, if it hadn't been for her, whether through her family or by the network in school, Cheng Shui should have had at least an 80% chance of getting this role. So it was no wonder that Cheng Shui hated her so badly. Cheng Shui was dressed in a DR, top-grade, custom-made lace dress and stood behind the girls protecting her. Her fair skin, bright almond eyes, and her mixed-blood facial features appeared delicate and defined. When she stood next to Xia, they made quite the couple, like a prince and princess from a fairy tale. At that moment, the little face of Cheng Shui was filled with sorrow. Even when the resentment and jealousy in her eyes made her look darker and more ferocious, her beautiful appearance still aroused pity. Cheng Shui wasn't only the class beauty of F class, but also the school beauty of Qinghe High School. Yuan Wan remembered that this Cheng Shui had a complicated family and had known Xia since they were little. In her previous life, she remembered that they got engaged in the end. Yuan Wan's true age was already 27. When she saw this group of girls, it felt like she was fighting with children. She twitched her mouth and replied, "Tisk, just for a few seconds of interaction. Is all this necessary? A few seconds of interaction?" There weren't a lot of appearances by the prince and Snow White together until Snow White ate the poison apple and fainted, after which the prince appeared in front of her. But those few seconds of interaction were a kissing scene. Thinking about it, Cheng Shui gritted her teeth. Yuan Wan's remark was deliberately provocative. Yuan Wan, watch yourself. Xia, do you really want to work with this person? Her tone was full of anger. Xia's face turned ugly. After all, what could he do? As a man, how could he go back on his words? All right, I was the one who drew the lots, so all of you shut up and start rehearsing. Those who aren't here to rehearse, just leave now. Chapter 50. Do we really have to kiss? Thanks to Xia's words, rehearsal could begin. The others were initially unwilling, but because of Xia's authority, they could only hold their anger in and start rehearsal obediently. Yuan Wan shrugged her shoulders nonchalantly. Let's do it then. We'll see how long you can last. Xia didn't have many parts in the play and was asleep on the seat by the window while waiting for his turn. Then the final act came and someone went to carefully wake him up. Xia, it's your turn. The next part of the play was when the 7 dwarfs placed Snow White into the crystal glass coffin, and the prince from the neighboring country rushed over on a white horse and kissed Snow White affectionately to revive her. Xia furrowed his brows, opened his eyes, and was greeted by everyone's sympathetic and pitiful gaze like they were in mourning. What kind of look is that? Yuan Wan jumped onto the table prepared for her. With her legs dangling off the side, she pulled out her makeup bag and remarked, "Give me a moment, let me touch up." She darkened her eyeshadow, applied more blush, and put on purple lipstick. The effect was striking to the max. "Okay, I'm ready." Yuan Wan lay down on her back after applying her lipstick. Under the murderous glares from the girls, Xia tousled his hair still messy from sleep, unbuttoned the top button on his collar, and walked towards the girl. Seeing the girl's green explosive wig, ghastly heavy metal makeup, non-mainstream skeleton tattoos, and purplish black lips, the boy felt queasy. Bearing in mind the idea that an early death meant early relief, Xia took a deep breath and slowly lowered his body. He drew the lot himself, so he had to go on even if he had to kneel. Don't. The girl was so frightened that she closed her eyes immediately as if the performance wasn't a fairy tale but a horror movie. Damn, he's not really going to kiss her, right? We're only high school students, we can't go that far. Just a little fake kiss would be enough. Nonsense, of course a fake kiss is enough. But the problem is that the fake kiss alone is already quite hard to bear, all right? Fake kiss? It was already a miracle that he was 3 steps away from her. Perhaps he lowered his body too much. Sassy suddenly turned around and started coughing wildly. The girls around him looked distressed and quickly brought water and paper towels to him. Chung Shui stared at Yuan ferociously and was about to cry from seeing Sassy's expression. Sassy, don't make it so hard for yourself anymore, all right? Yuan got up instantaneously with a look of innocence. Eh? What's wrong? Sassy gulped down a whole bottle of water before he calmed down and said, You, change your lipstick. Yuan blinked. After being poisoned by the poison apple, my lips would obviously turn purple. Be reasonable. The boy looked like he was about to collapse. Shut up. Just do it. All right, I'll change then. Yuan pouted and gave the expression that he was being a pain. In the end, she still took out her makeup wipes and removed the purple lipstick for a relatively normal red shade. Is this okay? Sassy closed his eyes. Let's try again. ORH. Yuan could only lay down again. Sassy walked towards Yuan again and slowly leaned forward, staring at that face slathered with thick makeup and blood-red mouth. This time, Sassy immediately rushed out of the classroom. After some time, Sassy finally came back, looking as if his whole body had been emptied. Yuan was somewhat speechless after seeing that. This guy was going too far. Was it worth dying to protect his ego? It'd be much less trouble to go straight to the teacher to request a change of partner. Then I wouldn't have to put in so much effort as well. Chapter 51. Grandma wants to meet you by the end of rehearsal. Sassy still wasn't able to kiss her. Indeed, not everyone's taste was as extraordinary as C.E. Han's. Yuan returned to the dormitory, removed her makeup, and took a shower. She planned her makeup look for tomorrow and turned on her computer at the same time. She no longer needed to spend so much time on the school's curriculum. She was prepared to buy films and documentaries online and seize the time to do some self-directed studying. After all, getting into university was just the beginning. Her final goal was to get back everything that had been taken away from her father by her second uncle and Yi. Before, she only thought to blame her father for being useless and causing her to be separated from Gu Yuze. But little did she know that she was the one who brought the whole family down. That time, Yi used Gu Yuze's name to lure her to a deserted house and drugged her to make her dizzy. Then, her second uncle blackmailed her to pressure her father to give up his shares and confess to a crime of misappropriation of public funds, or else he'd ruin her life. He was going to shoot her up with drugs, find a few men to fool around with her, and then leak a video of her drug abuse and sexual activity. Her father had doted on her since she was little, and the whole family treated her like a treasure and fulfilled all her wishes. While she was studying abroad, she almost lost her life due to a terrorist attack and was greatly traumatized. Her parents couldn't stop blaming themselves and immediately brought her back. They became more protective of her henceforth. Her parents' overprotectiveness probably caused her to become simple-minded and naive. Her father had already warned her not to leave the house by herself, but in order to meet Gu Yuze alone, she escaped the bodyguards and sneaked out anyway. It was, after all, Gu Yuze's invitation. Even if the skies rained down knives, she would still go. Not to mention that it was only her father's little warning holding her back. When faced with her second uncle's threats at the time, her father didn't hesitate to protect her and even sacrifice the entire Yi family. After that incident, her parents were afraid that she'd blame herself, incapable of handling the trauma, so they kept the truth from her. She was so silly to think that Gu Yuze simply didn't keep their appointment that time and had no idea that her wayward behavior had led to such serious consequences. She even cut ties with her parents for a scumbag who canceled their marriage after her father lost everything. She had mistaken a jackal for love and mistaken her closest relatives as enemies. At the thought of all this, Yuan wanted to strangle herself to death. Dad, Mom, wait for me. I will get every single thing back from them. At this moment, a personalized ringtone on her phone rang. It was Si Han calling. Yuan gathered her thoughts and steadied herself for the call. Hello? Have you ended class? The usual low and cold voice came through the receiver. Yup, class is finished. We just finished rehearsal, and the prince was so ugly that I nearly vomited on stage. At first, I wanted to tell the teacher to find a replacement, but the teacher said that the results of the drawing of lots couldn't be changed. Yuan grumbled on. She deliberately revealed her whereabouts in school, so that Si Han had no reason to say that she was hiding something from him. The man on the other end listened patiently to what was going on in her school, and when she was finished, he asked, Are you free this Saturday? Saturday? I should have. Nothing going on. The school allowed students to go home every Saturday and Sunday. If Si Han wanted her to go back, she didn't have any reason to decline. With this in mind, Yuan's voice became slightly nervous. Even if it was only 2 days, what if she went back and never came back out? Freedom was too important to her, and she still had so many things she needed to do. She definitely didn't want to go back to her old life. Grandma wants to meet you. He probably anticipated her nervousness and repulsion, as his voice instinctively became more withdrawn. Chapter 52. How can you be so shabby? Grandma. Yuan was stunned for a moment. At the same time, she also recalled some things that had happened before she was reborn. Before she was reborn, Si Han had also brought her to meet his grandma. In the Si family, the person Si Han was closest to was his grandmother. This old lady held a very high position in the family. Due to the premature death of Si Han's father, she doted on and loved Si Han the most. If Si Han liked something, she would give her unconditional support. But in her previous life, she had offended this old lady thoroughly. In her previous life, when Si Han's grandmother wanted to meet her, she couldn't help discussing it with Shinmeng-chi. Shinmeng-chi also put in quite a bit of effort and taught her all the ways to make the old lady loathe her. Naturally, she followed them all accordingly. Not only did she meet the lady in her atrocious makeup, she also put on a cold face from start to finish and didn't say a word at all. The old lady really loved her grandson so much that even when Yuan met her with her horrendous look and presented herself without any proper manners, the old lady still didn't mind at all. That is, until Yuan provoked the old lady's only trigger point, which was Si Han. While she was at the old house, Shinmeng-chi suddenly called her to tell her that Gu Yuzhe had been in a car accident and was in a critical condition. How could Si Han let her go to Gu Yuzhe? How the two of them ended up in a huge fight was predictable. She screamed and bit him like she was crazy and cursed him to die immediately. Hearing that she actually cursed Si Han to death, the old lady was so mad that she fainted on the spot and hated her from that moment onwards. But she did manage to achieve her goal. The old lady always nagged at Si Han to leave her. But even with the old lady's words, Si Han still didn't let her go. In the end, the old lady fell ill and passed away not long after. Even on her deathbed, her grandson's illness and the cancer that was by her grandson's side was still on her mind. These thoughts made Yuan feel horrible. Although she hated Si Han, she could tell that the old lady was initially truly sincere towards her. She didn't mind even when she was so rude and didn't show any interest in her family's background. There was a long silence over the phone, and Si Han's tone turned completely withdrawn. Forget it? Yuan finally regained her conscience and hurriedly replied, Grandma wants to see me? Then we'll definitely have to go. I'm just a little nervous. It's my first time meeting your grandma after all. What is she like? Does she have any hobbies? What should I wear? Should I prepare a gift? Hearing Yuan ask so many questions at once, the man on the other end stayed silent for a long time. Yuan was anxious. Hello? Hello? Are you still there?
Yes.
The man's tone was still a bit flat. You wanna go? Why not? You haven't answered my questions. Yuan asked. You don't have to prepare anything, just wait for me to fetch you, Si Han said. How can we do that? This is my first time meeting a parent, and first impressions are very important. You're too shabby. Yuan was unsatisfied. How about this? You can pick me up early on Saturday, and then we can go shopping together. Whether it was because she felt guilty from her previous life, or because the old lady was the only person who could restrain Si Han, she decided it was imperative to build a good relationship with her. Chapter 53. Marry a Wife for Her Virtues. Saturday afternoon. In the secluded alley at the north gate of Chinghe High School, a posh Bentley was conspicuously parked there that obviously didn't blend in with the mottled old walls and cracked cement road. The black exterior of the car looked very understated, but the interior was luxurious to perfection with real leather seats, expensive high-quality velvet blankets, and an automatic air conditioning system exuding a faint fragrance with a hypnotic effect. The whole car was fixed up very comfortably. The man was in a tailored dark black suit, sitting on a snow-white velvet seat. His face was handsome and apathetic as usual. There was a faint shadow under his eyelids due to many sleepless nights, making him look a bit grim and intimidating. At that moment, the man was gazing out of the window, pondering about something. In the driver's seat, Sui had two heavy dark circles around his eyes and a gloomy face. It was apparent that he had a sleepless night. He would never have imagined that Master actually wanted to bring that Yuan to meet old Madam. Ever since he found out about this, he felt very uneasy. Isn't the Master afraid that the woman's appearance will scare the living daylights out of Madam? Not to mention that woman's troublemaking temperament. Who's old Madam, you say? She's Master's greatest help and supporter of him, inheriting the family business. If things go poorly in the old house, the consequences would be extremely severe. Initially, he had always held onto a glimmer of hope, wishing that Master was just fooling around and pursuing what he couldn't have. Who knew that Master actually wanted to bring her to meet old Madam? As the saying goes, marry a woman for her virtue. If Master insists on being with this mentally unsound woman, he'll have to pay some exorbitant price someday. The more Sui thought, the more he feared. He couldn't help but protest, Master, there are some things that you won't like to hear, but I have to remind you even if I risk losing my life. Do think twice before you act. Old Madam is your closest kin, and her words hold the most weight in the Si family. If old Madam is hurt or offended, there will be dire consequences. If you were just keeping her privately in Jean Garden, then that's one thing. But she is a woman who you want to bring to meet old Madam, which means that she's one of the candidates to become Si family's household headmistress in the future, and with Miss Ye's personality, it's completely. Before Sui could continue, an icy cold voice came from the back seat and interrupted him with a strong sense of oppression. Who told you that's a possibility? A chill went down Sui's spine from the sudden coldness, and there was silence. The next second, the man's tone became colder and two frosty words were spat out of his thin lips, only one. The only candidate. The moment the man's words left his mouth, Sui shuddered. He opened his mouth wanting to speak, but in the end, was suppressed by a ferocious glare, so he didn't dare utter another word. He sat stiffly on his seat in disappointment, with the steering wheel in his hands. The atmosphere in the car froze like ice in an instant. Just as Sui was preparing for the worst, the sound of light footsteps came from a distance. Sui lifted up his bloodshot eyes towards the direction of the sound and saw a girl in Chinghe's school uniform walking towards them from the back door. The girl didn't have any makeup on and was carrying a pale blue backpack. Her long, jet black hair was tied into a neat ponytail, and she donned Chinghe's blue and white long-sleeve shirt and trousers, which looked a little odd and hadn't been designed to be aesthetically pleasing. But due to the girl's jade-like, translucent fair complexion, she exuded a teenage girl's vibrancy and liveliness. Unlike the exquisitely dressed socialite's daughters that he was accustomed to, she made people's eyes light up like a clear stream. After seeing clearly who it was, Sui was dumbfounded in disbelief. That is Yuan. Chapter 54. His actions tell it all. Yuan had thought about it and decided to meet old Madam in her school uniform. Although Si Han's grandmother had an extraordinarily honorable status, she felt that all the grandmothers in the world still shared similar tastes. Most of them would appreciate a neat, clean, and well-behaved girl. There was no other type of clothing that would give off a more obedient vibe than a school uniform. As for her face, aside from using a mask last night and performing her usual skincare routine, she didn't put on any makeup. Her hair was tied into a ponytail, showing off her beautiful forehead. Seeing that she wasn't the frightening female ghost that he'd imagined but a vibrant and likable girl, Sui was stunned for a long time before reacting. He stumbled clumsily out of the car to open the door of the back seat and then observed her through his rearview mirror with a baffled look. Yuan Wan's former favorite pastime was to go against the master, taking advantage of his affection for her. No matter how absurd her actions were, the master would always give in to her. She had such a good opportunity to cause trouble today, but she actually dressed so. Normally? This Yuan Wan has been acting too weird recently. What exactly is she planning? After Yuan Wan got in the car, she took a seat next to Si Han. Once she got in, she couldn't help but click her tongue in appreciation. You couldn't tell from the exterior of the car, but the interior was fixed up like a presidential suite of a hotel. The members of the Si family had put in a lot of effort just so Si Han could live in comfort. I wasn't sure if I'll be staying over. I didn't finish my homework, so I brought it along. Yuan Wan placed her backpack on her lap and explained while burying her head in her bag to dig out a little booklet and hastily said, "This is the list of gifts I came up with. I'm planning to head to Wanchun Hall to get some herbal supplements and then go to the mall to get some clothes, bags, scarves, or something for Grandma. But I'm not sure about Grandma's preferences, so you'll have to help me out a bit. Also, I'm broke, so I'll pick out the gifts, but you have to fork out the money." The girl had basically run over, so there was a thin layer of sweat on her forehead. The way she stared at her little booklet and spoke at that moment was unusually focused with a glimmer in her eyes. "Wan Wan, if you are lying to me, you better be able to guarantee to lie to me forever." Yuan Wan was about to continue speaking when she felt her chin being lifted up. His crisp breath drifted over her face gradually. The man's handsome, enchanting face increasingly loomed closer, and then there came a sharp pain on her lips. Feeling a hint of imperceptible danger, Yuan Wan was in complete confusion. What's wrong with this guy? I didn't do anything wrong, did I? Could it be because of how I'm dressed? Thinking that Si Han didn't like her appearance, Yuan Wan could only play along. "Hey, you don't like how I'm dressed? Since we're meeting Grandma today, and the elderly certainly wouldn't like a girl with heavy makeup on. I didn't apply any, so you'll have to put up with that a little." Hearing that the girl actually dressed like that on purpose for Grandma, Si Han was taken aback. His gaze skimmed over the girl's cheeks, neck and waist that was enclosed in her school uniform, and a strange heat rose from beneath his cold eyes. All of a sudden, he kissed her again, and unlike before when he skimmed the surface, he was now overbearing and even slightly rough, aggressively violating every part of her mouth. His actions showed quite clearly how he felt about her appearance. Chapter 55. A sense of relief. Sui saw that the situation at the back had suddenly become X-rated, so he blushed and quickly raised the partition. God, why does seeing the master with Yuan Wan in her school uniform feel so wrong? Yuan Wan first pulled Si Han to Wanchun Hall before heading to the luxury mall downtown to stroll around. The herbal supplements and tonic were easiest to choose. She just got Si Han to pick some top-graded varieties. With Si Han's stringent checks for the other items, everything went smoothly. Actually, what she bought wasn't important since the old lady had no lack of material things. They were all just a courtesy. After picking the gifts, the car slowly drove off in the direction of the Si family's old house. Almost an hour later, Yuan Wan's eyes fell upon the familiar estate. The estate was a Chinese-style manor, ancient and magnificent. After the car entered the big curved gate, it continued on for about 10 minutes before reaching the main house. At the door of the main house was an old housekeeper dressed in a creaseless uniform and gold-rimmed spectacles, awaiting their arrival. Upon seeing the arrival of Si Han's car, the old housekeeper immediately stepped forward, bowed and greeted respectfully, "Ninth Master." Si Han responded without a trace of expression. The old housekeeper spoke while taking a glance at the girl next to Si Han. Young Master was unsociable, aloof, eccentric and moody, and also abhorred women who got close to him. The old madam had previously plotted numerous solutions, but all failed to instigate any emotional connections with any girls. But now, young Master actually had a girlfriend and even brought her to the old house. Not only was it shocking to the old madam, all the servants were also in disbelief. When he saw that the girl beside young master was in her school uniform, the old housekeeper was even more surprised. Young master actually fell for such a young girl? He thought that young master would fall in love with a woman like Ms. Ruashi, who was elegant and sophisticated. However, even though this girl looked rather young, she had clear eyes, a graceful disposition, and her face was definitely glowing, even without any makeup. Just going by her appearance, she was quite compatible with the young master, but the housekeeper wasn't sure about her character yet. Since she was brought back personally by the young master, the old housekeeper's attitude was very respectful. He quickly nodded and said, "I guess this would be Ms. Yi. Hello, I am the housekeeper of the old house, Zhong Li." "Hello, housekeeper Zhong." Yi Wanwan greeted him politely without any further words. As she was entering the house for the first time, it was better to remain reserved. Yi Wanwan looked at the old housekeeper and was overcome by emotions. This old housekeeper in her previous life wasn't so polite the first time he met her. Previously, when the old housekeeper saw her explosive green wig and atrocious makeup, his face turned green and he clutched his chest, almost fainting on the spot from shock. Compared to old Madame C, who could still chat with her warmly and pleasantly after seeing her appearance, she really was something. The old housekeeper saw Yi Wanwan standing obediently next to Si Han, reserved and shy, and he liked her even more. "Ninth young master, Ms. Yi, quickly come inside. Old Madam has been waiting the whole day." Finally, as she stepped into this place again, Yi Wanwan's pupils contracted, and she clenched her fist subconsciously as the horrible memories of the past came flooding back uncontrollably. Can I really change everything in this life? Just as Si Han was about to step inside, he paused and his spine stiffened. He lowered his deep and quiet eyes, his gaze falling on his left hand, and saw the girl's little hand clutching his unexpectedly. As Si Han paused all of a sudden, Yi Wanwan then realized that because she was so nervous, she'd grabbed onto the closest thing to her, which turned out to be Si Han's hand. Yi Wanwan was a little embarrassed, wanting to retract her hand. But before she could move, the man had already solidified his grip on her hand and continued walking. Feeling his palm as warm as a silk cocoon wrapped around her little hand, she strangely felt a sense of relief, although the person next to her was the one she feared the most. Chapter 56. The little couple hand in hand. Old Madam had already been informed by the servants of their arrival and was pacing around the dining hall anxiously. She had already found out from Sui about the girl's background. She was initially shocked to find out that she was still in her senior year, but thankfully, even though she was a little young, she was grown up already. However, the girl didn't come from a good family, in stark contrast to the C family. But as long as little Ninth liked her, everything else didn't matter. Most importantly, she wanted to examine this girl's character and whether she was true to little Ninth. Hearing footsteps from the entrance, old Madam looked towards the door hurriedly. The housekeeper was walking in front, and behind him were two people, her grandson with his usual face as rigid as an ice sculpture, carrying a light blue school bag on his arm, and beside him was a lovely little girl. The girl's plain little face was as bright as peaches, her black hair tied up in a ponytail, and she was in Qinghe High School's uniform. She looked extremely well-behaved, making anyone unbearably fond of her. What surprised her most was that they were actually holding hands. She knew little Nine to his personality too well. Any ordinary woman wouldn't be able to get closer than 3 steps from him, much less touch him. But right now, he was actually holding the girl's hand voluntarily. This had never happened before. Thus, the old madam looked at Yi Wanwan with more contentment. Si Han held Yi Wanwan and walked towards the old madam. "Grandma." The old lady stared at Yi Wanwan for a moment, her expression full of love. She spoke very amiably, like she was afraid to scare the girl off. "This must be Wanwan. Quick, come over to Grandma." Yi Wanwan glanced at Si Han and then walked to the old madam obediently. "How are you, Grandma?" "Good." The old lady was beaming with happiness when she replied. Glancing at Sui carrying various bags behind them, she said, "You must be tired. I already said that you didn't have to bring any gifts. You just needed to bring yourself." That was what she said, but her tone was still very happy. Although she didn't have a lack of anything at home, These gifts were given by her future granddaughter-in-law. They held extreme significance. "Old madam, dinner is ready." At that moment, the servant from the kitchen came over to inform her. "You guys came at the right time. Come over, let's chat while eating. We don't have a lot of rules at home, just be comfortable." The old madam was worried that Yuan Wan was reserved and took care to purposely mention that. She pulled Yuan Wan's hand affectionately to the dinner table and even left her grandson behind. Si Han passed the school bag to the old housekeeper, and his long legs followed them to the dining table. The old madam was already chatting warmly with Yuan Wan. "Wan Wan, is being in senior year tiring? I hope your studies weren't interrupted by coming over to visit me." Grandma C's warm and affectionate attitude helped Yuan Wan calm down quite a bit. At present, it seemed like the old lady's first impression of her wasn't bad. Yuan Wan shook her head. "No, they weren't. We have no lessons on Saturdays and Sundays. This child, little Ninth, didn't even tell me he's seeing someone. It was only when I saw him laughing in the corner by himself while looking at his phone that I asked what was he looking at. Then, he finally told me that he was reading a text from his girlfriend. That's when I found out. Since I wasn't aware he started dating, I had a bit of a fright, so I rushed him to bring you home for me to meet." The old madam spoke and shot a look at her grandson. Yuan Wan was surprised to hear that Si Han laughed at her text. It was really hard to imagine. Chapter 57. He wouldn't be so childish, right? The old madam continued talking about Si Han, with the atmosphere in the dining hall harmonious. As to being sold by his own grandmother, Si Han didn't seem to mind at all. He spoke very little, but she could tell that in front of the old madam, he was much more personable and warm compared to his usual cold and distant manner. The old madam prepared a whole table full of dishes. Every dish was extremely delicious. Initially, Yuan Wan was planning to be more restrained since it was her first time there. Si Han didn't speak much, but his hands didn't stop moving and kept putting food on her plate. Before she knew it, she had already finished 3 bowls of rice. "Oh, don't give me any more food. I can't eat anymore." Yuan Wan whined as she looked at the mountain of food stacked in her bowl. She didn't want Grandma to think that she had a bottomless stomach on their first meeting. Si Han looked at the girl's whiny little face, reached his hand over, took her bowl, and finished it for her. "This guy, isn't he squeamish?" Yuan Wan was a little taken aback, but seeing that he helped lighten her load, she heaved a sigh of relief. The old madam watched the two of them interacting, and her heart was filled with comfort. Also, this girl was just as her grandson had described. She wasn't picky with food at all. She also had a good appetite and was much easier on the eyes than those socialites who could only eat a few mouthfuls. After dinner, the old madam was worried that Wan Wan was bored of keeping her company. She said in a caring way, "Little Ninth, this is Wan Wan's first time here. Give her a little tour of the place." Si Han nodded. "Then off we go, Grandma." Yuan Wan said farewell to the old madam and then followed Si Han to the courtyard obediently. The night was chilly. The sky overhead was filled with stars, and the air had a crisp, floral scent. Although it was unlike the wonderful workmanship in Jing Garden, the ancient house had its own flavor as well. Taking a stroll through the courtyard after dinner was really nice. Yuan Wan only found out then that the uneasiness she felt upon entering the old house had vanished. Appreciating the night without any distractions, the Si Han next to her somehow had another problem again. He was completely fine while they were eating, but something felt wrong now. She raised her eyes to look at his face, and certainly, she noticed that there was a bit of unhappiness evident on the man's face, and even his footsteps accelerated. Yuan Wan's tiny legs couldn't keep up, and very quickly, she was left behind. When did I agitate this guy again? Did I say something wrong while talking to old madam? I don't think so. Yuan Wan was a little afraid of the dark. It was fine if she had someone next to her, but alone, she was terrified. Seeing that he was disappearing into the night, Yuan Wan didn't have time to think. She jogged to catch up and clung onto one of Si Han's hands. It seemed in that moment when she held Si Han's hand that the coldness she felt from him previously dissipated immediately. After she was reborn, she became very perceptive of Si Han's emotions, so her intuitions were never wrong. Yuan Wan blinked her eyes in surprise. Could it be that this fellow was so silent and threw a tantrum just now simply because I didn't hold his hand while walking? Han wouldn't be so childish, right? Chapter 58. Fast asleep, Yuan thought maybe she was overthinking things. But no matter what was wrong with him, it was better to hold on to his hand so she wouldn't have to worry about not keeping up. At such a big place, it would be very easy to get left behind and lost. After she grabbed onto his hand, Han merely slowed down but remained speechless and walked her around the old house. When he was preparing to go for a second round, Yuan couldn't take it any longer. Han, my legs are tired. Should we sit for a bit? Han glanced at her, seemingly not wanting to stop, but in the end, he brought her to sit on a long wooden bench. Yuan sighed in comfort, loosened her grip on him, stretched her body and muttered, "Grandma's really nice. I was afraid she wouldn't like me at first." Han looked at his empty palm for an instant, then returned his gaze. No way. Actually, Yuan knew that aside from her good behavior, the biggest factor in determining Grandma's impression of her still depended on Han. As the saying goes, he that loves the tree loves the branch. As long as she didn't make the same mistakes or cross a line, the meeting this time would most likely go smoothly. Of course, showing some affection to Han wouldn't hurt. "Oh yes, Han, why does Grandma call you Little Ninth and others call you Ninth Young Master?" Yuan asked out of curiosity. According to what she knew, Han only had an elder brother, so wasn't he supposed to be second in line? Han leaned against the chair, glancing at the stars above. "I've been weak and sickly since I was little, so this was a way to avoid tempting fate." After hearing this, Yuan understood. So this was the reason. I've also heard this saying before. So making your family members call you Ninth Young Master instead of Second Young Master would prevent the Grim Reaper from taking your soul, huh? Whether it's true or not, it's better to err on the side of caution. Han was still alive after all, and even lived to become a devil that ghosts and humans feared. A living king of hell. It was said that Han and his father had been attacked previously, and his father had died on the spot. After getting injured in that incident, his body had never really recovered. Considering how Han went through such a tragedy at a young age, barely holding onto his life, not to mention his current insomnia and possibly numbered days left on this earth, it was no wonder that old Madam loved him so ferociously. Due to the good atmosphere, Yuan asked a taboo question out of curiosity. "Han, why can't a fine guy like you fall asleep all the time?" Yuan waited for Han's reply, but nothing came. And just as she thought she had gone overboard, she felt a load on her shoulders. She turned her head subconsciously and saw that Han was leaning on her shoulder with both eyes closed, with long and calm breaths. He had fallen asleep. Yuan's expression darkened and she swallowed her question. Han seemed to be sleeping soundly. Yuan didn't dare move and let him continue resting on her. However, the night was chilly, and if he continued to sleep like that, he'd most likely catch a cold. The worried Yuan didn't notice that not too far off stood two people. The old madam realized that the two of them hadn't returned for some time, so she went out to the courtyard with the housekeeper to find them. What shocked her the most was that the two children were on the bench and her grandson had his eyes shut, leaning against that girl's shoulder. He seemed to be asleep. How could that be? Chapter 59. How did he fall asleep? Housekeeper Zhong knew the old madam very well and naturally knew about young master's strange illness. His face was also filled with surprise at this sight. Old madam, this. The old madam's expression was still anxious and doubtful. She slowed down and walked towards the both of them carefully. Seeing the old madam there, Yuan subconsciously wanted to get up, but because Han was leaning on her, she couldn't stand up. "Grandma." The old madam looked confused, and seeing that her grandson still had no reaction as she got closer, she said, "Wan, Little Ninth." Yuan was afraid of the bad temper he'd get when woken up and so hadn't dared to wake him up until now. But now that old madam was here, she gently shoved him. Han, wake up." The guy sleeping soundly against her furrowed his brows after being pushed. His peaceful and gentle expression was stained with a shroud of darkness, seemingly displeased. The old madam stared at her grandson's sleepy face, and it took her a long time to regain her senses as she was filled with emotion. Don't, Wanwan, don't wake him up, let him sleep for a while. This child usually sleeps too little. Si Han's small frown caused Wanwan's little heart to shiver in fear. She also didn't want to get on the wrong side of the devil. She heaved a sigh of relief after hearing that and stroked Si Han's hair with her hands to pacify him while asking softly, "Is there a blanket? I'm afraid he'll catch a cold if he sleeps like that." There is. Old Zhong, go and get it, the old madam briskly replied.
Yes.
Housekeeper Zhong quickly came back with a light and soft gray blanket. Thank you, Uncle Zhong. Yi Wanwan took the blanket and covered Si Han. After she had soothed him, Si Han's brows were no longer furrowed together, and he was sleeping soundly again. The old madam was afraid that she'd disturb her grandson, so she signaled Yi Wanwan with her eyes and then left silently with the housekeeper. Actually, the old madam didn't go far. She kept watch for a bit, watching the way her grandson slept, her eyes red. Old Zhong, go fetch Su-yi and Dr. Imo. Yes, old madam. Housekeeper Zhong immediately called for them. Imo Xian and Sui were at the old house, and after being called, they quickly followed housekeeper Zhong to the courtyard. Old madam, did you ask for me? Imo Xian felt uncertain as he thought old madam would be meeting her future granddaughter-in-law. Why did she call me over at this hour? Su-yi, who was standing at the side, didn't understand either. The old madam stared at Imo Xian sternly. You told me before that little nine to his recent condition was very terrible. The failure rate of the hypnotism was increasing and he couldn't fall asleep for many days in a row, right? As this tough problem was brought up again, Imo Xian nodded slightly, yes. After the old madam heard his answer, she pointed a short distance away. Then tell me, what's the meaning of that? Imo Xian's confused gaze followed the direction that old madam was pointing towards. Then, he saw that Si Han was actually sleeping soundly against Yi Wanwan. Imo Xian was speechless. I even went over to confirm that little ninth was asleep. Also, I've been watching from here, and he's slept for half an hour already, the old madam said. Imo Xian was even more surprised. Si Han actually slept without my hypnotism? Sui was also stunned. How did ninth master fall asleep? Imo Xian asked anxiously. Chapter 60. Wanwan, a sleeping potion? The old madam looked in the direction of her grandson and said in a low voice that, I'm not sure. After dinner, I asked little ninth to bring Wanwan to walk around in the courtyard. Seeing that they had been gone for so long, I went to find these two children, and then I saw little ninth leaning against Wanwan, asleep. It was rare to see little ninth asleep, so I requested Wanwan not to wake him up and let him sleep for a little longer. Imo Sun wrinkled his forehead. How could this be? I've been with the ninth master for so long, and he's never fallen asleep naturally. This is the first time. If this wasn't the case, I wouldn't have had such headaches over him all this time. At that moment, Sui seemed to recall something. His eyes glistened and he said hurriedly, No, actually, this isn't the first time. Not the first time? What do you mean? Imo Sun and the old lady looked at Sui. Sui recalled and replied, I remember that one night, ninth master also fell asleep under similar conditions. What kind of conditions? Could you be more specific? Imo Sun pressed on. Sui omitted the part where Wanwan escaped and caused Si Han to have consecutive sleepless nights and explained simply, that time, the ninth master was also with Ms. Yi, at Jing Garden on the living room sofa. Ninth master hugged Ms. Yi and slept the whole night. One whole night? That's right. I was also pretty shocked at the time, so it stood out to me. Ninth master started sleeping around 10 at night and woke up at 6 in the morning. A total of 8 hours of sleep. Sui replied. Imo Sun pinched the area between his brows. Why didn't you tell me earlier? This is huge. Sui put on an innocent face. That ninth master hadn't slept consecutively for so many nights so that time. I thought he was just too exhausted so he fell asleep. And I also thought that he would tell you himself. Imo Sun took a deep breath and furrowed his brows. As if he would tell me personally. Any more? Are there any other incidents? Tell me all of them at once. Sui thought carefully and realized that there was. It seems like there's one more, but I'm not too sure. Sui hesitated for a moment and then said, the night before Ninth Master came to the old house for a checkup, he returned to Jean Garden before dawn because he went to the school to look for Ms. Wan Wan that night. I was waiting in the car all night, for more than 6 hours, before he returned. That time, I saw that Ninth Master looked quite good, like he had just woken up, but I didn't pay much attention to it. Thinking back, could it be possible that during those 6 hours or so, Ninth Master was sleeping with Ms. Wan Wan? Immerse pondered silently for a long time. If your speculation was right, then there is a commonality between all 3 times when he fell asleep naturally. Wan Wan was there? Sui nodded. Seems to be the case. The old madam heard, understood, and said emotionally, this means that whenever Wan Wan is around, little Ninth can fall asleep more easily? If that's the case, then great. Immerse said cautiously, old madam, please don't get too excited. We need to make some more observations. In the entirety of Ninth Master and Ms. Ye's relationship, this has happened very rarely, only 3 times recently. The old madam was slightly disappointed when she heard that. She turned to Sui and said, Sui, you're by little Nine to decide every day. Now, do pay more attention and find out exactly what's going on. Got it? Chapter 61. A piece of starlight at the moment. Wan Wan didn't know about the speculations of old madam and Immerse, only that Si Han's illness wasn't as serious as 7 years in the future. The man in deep sleep looked harmless and didn't have that usual fearful aura around him, which allowed her to relax a bit. While Si Han slept, Wan Wan looked through some entertainment news and the latest gossip on her phone. The hottest stars in the entertainment circle changed rapidly, switching out new sets of people every few months, not to mention 7 years later. Other than evildoers like Xiezhiji, who became famous instantly, most people who were big stars 7 years in the future weren't famous yet, and some of them haven't even entered the industry. Currently, the Yi Group had a number of theater chains, film production companies, and even a stake in the media. Below them, Emperor Entertainment was the industry's most senior media agency, which represented the big shots. Now, or 7 years in the future, famous celebrity kings and queens signed with Emperor Entertainment. It could be said that Yi Group controlled half of the entertainment circle, holding countless artists' livelihoods in their hands and deciding their fates. Whether you made it or not depended on whether this company wanted to support you. From her memory, in the upcoming few years, the Shen family would grow rapidly, going from being a small company to occupying an important place in the entertainment industry and even catching up to the Yi family. In this life, I'll never let these people succeed. However, before she could act on anything, she needed Si Han's total trust and a certain degree of freedom. She had to make the most of every second to arm herself with the relevant knowledge. She had to take back everything she lost, crush Yi Group, and return to the top of the entertainment circle. With these thoughts, it was like the fog shielding her ignorance and hesitation had been scattered, and Wan Wan was filled with motivation instantly. When Si Han opened his eyes, what he saw was the girl's bright sparkling face and a pair of black eyes. It was as if she was the Milky Way with thousands of twinkling stars. She was incredibly beautiful. His slender fingers couldn't help stroking that piece of starlight. Wan Wan was too busy scheming and suddenly felt something scratching at her eyelids. It was then she found out that Si Han was awake, and she lifted her head. You're awake? What were you doing? As he just woken up, his voice was a little raspy. Seeing that you fell asleep, I didn't want to interrupt you, so I was just browsing on my phone. Are you tired? Do you want to go back to the house to sleep? You'll get a cold if you sleep out here. Wan Wan asked. Hearing the girl's concern for him, his expression looked slightly startled. He wrapped both of them up in the blanket and like a big cat, he tucked his head into her neck. Want to keep me company? Chapter 62. Aren't you going to keep your majesty company? What's with this whiny tone? The warm breath coming from the crook of her neck and that languid, sleepy voice by her ear left Wan Wan dumbstruck. Is Si Han actually spoiled? Maybe it was because of the shock, or the irresistible way Si Han was acting that led Yi Wan to nod her head subconsciously. When she had realized what happened, Si Han had already gotten up and was walking back. After they got back, servants immediately welcomed them warmly. Ninth Master, Ms. Yi. Old Madam specially instructed us to prepare a room for Ms. Yi. Would Ms. Yi like to rest now? Let me show you your room. She had no choice as she was captivated by his charm and had already promised Si Han that she'd accompany him. Yi Wan looked at Si Han and said, I'll drop my things off first and take a bath. I'll catch you later. The still sleep-deprived Si Han wasn't in a pleasant mood, but he agreed. Thus, Yi Wan followed the maid and entered the room on the second floor facing the south. Ms. Yi, please enter. This is the room. The maid pushed the door open. Once the door was open, all she could see was that the whole room had a pink theme. Pink bedsheets and quilt, pink curtains and carpet. Even the headboard was in the shape of a little crown and overhead was a dreamy canopy. It was simply dreamlike and girly. Her misunderstanding of the old madam had been quite deep in her previous life. She had felt that she was the devil, but actually, the old madam really viewed her as her future granddaughter-in-law. Otherwise, she wouldn't have prepared a room for her and put in so much effort simply because she and Si Han were dating. You could even say that she treated her like her own granddaughter. But in her previous life, she was a troublemaker and criticized every single thing. Miss, are you satisfied with this room? If there's anything you don't like, we can change it immediately, the maid said, with fear and hesitation. Yi Wan regained her composure after her initial surprise. No need for the trouble. I like this room a lot. Please thank Grandma for me. The maid heaved a sigh of relief. Then Ms. Yi, do have a restful night. If you need anything, you can reach me by pressing the bell at any time. All right, thank you. Yi Wan nodded. Clothes and all other amenities were available in the room. Yi Wan picked a cute, baby pink nightgown from the closet and then headed to the bathroom to shower. Girls tend to take longer in the shower, and when she was done, half an hour had already passed. Yi Wan dried her hair while opening the bathroom door and immediately saw Si Han sitting on that extremely dreamlike and girly princess bed. She was unsure how long he'd been waiting. Yi Wan was stupefied for a moment and then quickly said, Let me blow-dry my hair and apply my cream. I'll be done really soon. Seeing that Si Han didn't reply, Yi Wan sat down in front of the dresser and started drying her hair. In the meantime, Si Han was silently sitting on the edge of the bed, waiting for her. Watching her dry her hair, splash water on her face, apply facial essences, eye cream, and cleansing cream. His gaze didn't leave her for a second. Yi Wan peeped at the man from the mirror. His face looked slightly annoyed. She strangely felt that Si Han's face was plastered with these words written on them. Why are you still not coming over to accompany your majesty? Yi Wan sped up, wiped her face hastily and put everything away. I'm done. Let's go. Chapter 63. You're amazing. If Yi Wan's room was comparable to a fantasy idol drama, then Si Han's room was akin to a scene from a thriller, just like his dark bedroom in the Jean Garden. When Yi Wan went over, there was already someone waiting inside. It was Si Han's private doctor, Immerse. Seeing the two of them enter, Immerse stood up. Ninth Master, Ms. Yi. Si Han seemed to be accustomed to Immerse appearing in his bedroom at this hour, so he walked to his bed expressionless. Yi Wan followed behind Si Han, her footsteps slightly hesitant. Am I disturbing you guys by being here? She knew that nobody was allowed to interrupt while Si Han was being hypnotized. Immerse looked at Yi Wan. Theoretically, she would be a disturbance. Hypnotism needs to take place in a completely enclosed space with no outsiders. However, considering their speculations that night and also, since Yi Wan was Si Han's personal guest, he didn't dare to chase her away, so he said, Let's try this out first. Oh, Yi Wan nodded. Si Han laid in bed and saw her standing some distance away. He then furrowed his brows. Yi Wan was a little confused. Si Han asked her to accompany him, but she didn't really understand what he meant by accompany. Furthermore, with Immerse still around, she was embarrassed to just lie on the bed next to him. Come over. While Yi Wan was still hesitant, the great devil's patience had run out. Aware of the danger in the atmosphere, Yi Wanwan scurried over at once and sat down on the edge of the bed. In the next second, he stretched his long arms to scoop her body up, grabbed her waist, and laid his head on her tummy. Yi Wanwan leaned on the side of the bed. With her body used as a pillow, she didn't dare to move an inch. Immerse was busy getting ready to perform the hypnotism and was slightly surprised at Yi Wanwan's change in attitude. In the past, Yi Wanwan viewed Si Han as scary, but she was still very strong-willed and refused to give in. But hopefully, this woman has really figured things out and doesn't hold any ill intentions. Otherwise, the person who'll suffer will be herself. From a bystander's point of view, he knew it was wrong of Si Han to disregard the girl's wishes and force her to be by his side. But talking rationally about right and wrong with this emotionless person who crawled out from hell? That was senseless. After a moment, everything was finally ready. Immerse walked over to the edge of the bed. "Ninth Master, we may begin." The Si Han on the bed didn't respond. "Ninth Master?" Immerse called out again. Si Han still didn't respond. Finally, Yi Wanwan saw that Si Han was sleeping soundly with his eyes closed. She began. "Ninth Master seems to be asleep already. Dr. Imo, you're amazing." Immerse was quiet for a long while, and his face surveyed the scene once, like a merry-go-round, completely speechless. "What's so amazing? I didn't even do a single thing." Immerse saw for himself that he wasn't just asleep, but was sleeping very peacefully. He wasn't even disturbed by the people talking next to him. Immerse had mixed feelings. Could it be that the times when Si Han fell asleep naturally were truly because of this woman? Then why didn't I realize it before? Also, Yi Wanwan didn't do anything to cause it, right? Chapter 64. Her cover would be blown. Immerse looked at Yi Wanwan. "Since Ninth Master is asleep, I'll get going." Yi Wanwan didn't notice any difference in Immerse, so she nodded and replied, "All right." After Immerse left, Yi Wanwan continued to accompany Si Han for half an hour before confirming that he was indeed asleep and then returned to her own room. The next day, under the pergola in the courtyard, Si Han did his work while Yi Wanwan worked on her homework next to him. The two of them were concentrated on their own tasks, looking warm and harmonious. Probably due to a good night's sleep, Si Han was in a good mood the entire day. He didn't throw a fit even when a servant accidentally spilt water over his papers. He merely frowned and waved the servant away, then instructed Su-yi to retype the document. That servant stumbled off like he was in a dream. Su-yi brought the retyped document carefully over to Si Han, then continued standing by his side in silence. These 2 days, Su-yi's thoughts were somewhat complicated. Yi Wanwan had been so obedient, which made him question whether she had been possessed. Even the old madam was very pleased with her, and the things he feared didn't happen. Maybe I'm really overthinking things? At that moment, a phone rang. Sui looked at the table instinctively and saw that the ringing came from Yi Wanwan's phone. On the display was Shinming Chi's name. Seeing this name, an ominous foreboding rose in Su-yi's heart. Yi Wanwan finished all her homework very quickly, and while she was contemplating tackling math, an incoming call interrupted her. Seeing the name on the display, Yi Wanwan's eyes glistened. Shinming Chi. If she remembered correctly, Shinming Chi of the past had called her at this time precisely to inform her that Gu Yuzhe had gotten in a car accident. However, this time, Shinming Chi didn't know that she was at the old house yet still. She called. This was understandable since she could change the series of events at the old house, but couldn't prevent Gu Yuzhe from getting in a car accident. With such a good opportunity to cause trouble, Shinming Chi naturally didn't pass it up, so she called her just like she had in her previous life. "Let me go take a call," Yi Wanwan informed Si Han, then walked towards some faraway shade in the trees. Si Han glanced at Yi Wanwan's back, his gaze gloomy. A few seconds after Yi Wanwan walked away, Suyi's phone rang as well. Disbelieving what the person was saying over the phone, Suyi's face turned white like it was the end of the world. After a long while, Sui hung up and looked at Si Han in a state of distress, and he seemed to be hesitant about what he wanted to say. Si Han was aware of Suyi's strange behavior, so he threw him a harsh look. "Speak." Suyi's body shook as he said, "I just received the news that Gu Yuzhe was in a car accident." It seems pretty serious, and he's currently getting emergency treatment at the hospital. At this point, Sui didn't dare continue talking. What he had been worried about had finally happened, and it was even more serious than what he'd imagined. The call Yuan picked up just now was probably Shin Mingqi telling her the same. Gu Yuzhe had been hurt so badly. How could Yuan resist going to see him? Maybe once she heard this news, her cover would be blown. Chapter 65. Let's have some fun. Yuan wasn't worried at all. She allowed the phone to ring once more before slowly picking up. Hello? Wan. What took you so long to answer? Where are you? In school? Wherever you are, hurry come down to Renai Hospital. Mr. Gu is in trouble. Shin Mingqi's frantic voice came through the receiver. Sure enough, this call from Shin Mingqi was as she'd expected. Yuan gently stroked the rose next to her cheek, pretended to be surprised and raised her brows. In trouble? Yes, I just received the news that Mr. Gu was in a car accident and was hurt pretty badly. He's currently in the emergency room, and the doctor said his life might be in danger. If you don't want to regret this day your whole life, then head over there now. Shin Mingqi's tone was steadfast, as if she was sure that after hearing this news, Wan would definitely disregard everything and rush over. Yuan seemed to have suddenly turned cold towards Gu Yuzhe, and this made Shin Mingqi very uneasy. Now, this was simply a heaven-sent opportunity to revive those feelings in Yuan. In the past, she'd make a big fuss even if Gu Yuzhe hurt his hand lightly. She didn't believe that Yuan could act cold-hearted this time. Afraid that Yuan wasn't hooked, Shin Mingqi added some more bait. Wan, Mr. Gu's car accident was a bit weird. The car crashed straight into him in broad daylight, as if on purpose. Could it be that Mr. Gu offended someone? Who'd be so daring to hurt the Gu's family young master? She was obviously hinting that Si Han was involved in Gu Yuzhe's car accident. If she could worsen the relationship between Yuan and Si Han at the same time, that'd be like hitting two birds with one stone. Yuan sneered in her heart after hearing this. Although some things had changed, Shin Mingqi's tactics hadn't. Her fight with Si Han in her previous life was all because of those words Shin Mingqi had just said to sow discord between them. In actuality, Gu Yuzhe's car accident was simply a fluke. Even though it was cleared up in the end, Shin Mingqi only made subtle hints and didn't specifically blame Si Han. Also, in the past, she'd never suspect that Shin Mingqi would say all those things to cause trouble and would instead believe that Si Han was indeed linked to Gu Yuzhe's accident. Shin Mingqi rambled on for almost half a day, and after it all, Yuan leisurely replied with 2 words, "Got it?" She hung up. After she hung up, Yuan smiled dryly and stared at her phone. Right now, Shin Mingqi must be hiding behind the hospital door, waiting to catch her in the act of cheating and then plotting to send proof to Si Han, allowing him to catch the traitor. This was her plan. TSK, since Shin Mingqi's trying to mess with me, why not join her at her own game and have some fun together? After finishing up with the call, Yuan went back to the courtyard. After packing up her textbooks, Yuan looked at Si Han gleefully and said, "Darling, it's getting late. I still have to go to class tomorrow. I'm going to head back to school." Despite seeing Yuan returning from a call and requesting to leave immediately afterwards, Si Han didn't show any change in his expression. He looked at her glumly, that pitiless pair of eyes like scary black holes with the ability to swallow up the light. "Go back to school?" he asked plainly. The Yuan from the past probably wouldn't have been able to detect the difference in Si Han, but right now, Yuan felt something was wrong with Si Han's attitude. Si Han most likely knew about everything and thought that she wanted to go to the hospital to see Gu Yuzhe. However, she acted like she didn't notice any difference. She carried her school bag and said naturally, Yup, you're busy with your work, so don't bother seeing me off. I'll go back by myself." Chapter 66. The calm before the storm. When Yuan said that she'd go back herself, Si Han's black hole pupils turned dimmer and the invisible waves beneath his pupils seemed to be gushing out, but in a fleeting moment they were back to normal, as if it was an illusion. Yuan took his silence as consent, so she walked up to him innocently and gave him a peck on the cheek. "Off I go then." I'll say bye to Grandma first. She walked joyfully towards the house. Immediately after Yuan left, a terrifying chill and rage erupted. The silent and calm little garden quickly transformed into a hell with dark winds blowing and a palpable feeling of murderous intentions. At that moment, Suyi's heart had turned into ashes. He kept praying and praying that Yuan wouldn't do anything stupid. But then, he witnessed her running wildly on the road to death. This foolish woman still wanted to go to Guyuze. She even thought that Master wouldn't find out, treating him like an idiot. Suyi's forehead dripped cold sweat as he stuttered. Ninth Master. Should we stop her? Han drew his gaze back from the girl and shut his eyes slowly. The terrifying atmosphere was dispelled the moment his eyes shut. There was a dead silence in the area. Without Han's orders, Suyi didn't dare make a move. At the same time, in the living room, the old madam was filled with dread when she found out that Yuan was leaving. She really liked this girl and had seen a great transformation in her grandson these 2 days. Naturally, this made her even more satisfied with Yuan. Wan, I know little Ninth likes to be alone and has a bad temper, but actually, he doesn't want to be this way either. You should also know that little Ninth has trouble sleeping. Think about it, because he gets such little sleep. Imagine how horrible he feels. It definitely impacts his temperament as well. But after little Ninth started dating you, I've noticed that his temperament has become gentler. Wan, Grandma is truly thankful for you. Thank you for your patience and accommodating little Ninth. In the future, if that brat is ruthless and bullies you, let Grandma know anytime and Grandma will definitely be on your side. Thank you, Grandma. Hearing the old lady pouring her heart out to her, Yuan felt very emotional. No matter how respectable and honorable this legendary figure was, in this moment she was just an ordinary grandma. It was a pity that the old lady thought that she and Han were a loving couple. Little did she know that her relationship with Han was akin to a bubble, easily burst with a single touch. Yuan insisted that she didn't want to trouble anyone with her departure. In the end, she called herself a car and left. In the old lady's eyes, Yuan's actions were considerate, but in Suyi's eyes, it looked like she was shaking them off and eagerly rushing to the hospital to meet Guyuze. In the past, Han would never have allowed her to go back to school by herself. But this time, he completely gave in. But the more lenient Han was, the more Suyi was afraid. The Han now was like the calm before the storm. If Master ordered him to capture her back and tie her up now, that was better than what would happen if he caught her red-handed. This time, I'm afraid Yuan's done for. To be frank, he had really enjoyed these few peaceful days, but unfortunately, they were merely an illusion. On the other side, Yuan was already quite a distance away in her car. When they reached a fork in the road, Yuan suddenly said, "Sir, don't take me to Qinghe High School anymore. Head to Ren AI Hospital instead." Chapter 67. Here comes the wolf. Hearing Yuan change the destination all of a sudden, the driver jerked the steering wheel in the opposite direction and headed in the direction of Ren AI Hospital. "Miss, why do you want to go to the hospital suddenly? Are you feeling unwell?" The driver was a little worried, so he asked. "No, it's my boyfriend. He's always having insomnia. I heard that there's a famous senior doctor at Ren AI Hospital, and he's really good at treating patients with insomnia, so I'm going there to find out more." "I see. Your boyfriend is a lucky man," the driver praised. Yuan smiled, said nothing, and stared out of the window blankly. Shortly after, the car reached the entrance of Ren AI Hospital. Yuan looked like her original self. She was wearing a pink dress and conspicuously stood there looking very beautiful. The Shun Mengqi, hiding in the dark, saw her almost immediately. Seeing how attractive Yuan was, a shred of jealousy flashed in Shun Mengqi's eyes. But seeing that she came obediently as expected, her face filled with disdain and mockery. "So what if you're pretty? You're so dumb you actually got fooled by me." Shin Mengqi relaxed only when she saw with her own eyes that Yuan had walked into Ren AI Hospital. She took out her phone and texted Han. "Mr. C, I was wondering if Wan is there with you right now? I was feeling sick earlier, so I went to the hospital, and I happened to see someone that looked like Wan. I'm not sure whether it was her and couldn't get through to her phone either. I'm a little worried. Has she fallen ill? She obviously wasn't so dumb as to purposely drive a wedge between them. She just wanted Si Han to find out for himself. Although she didn't want to admit it, Si Han cared deeply for Yuan, and if he knew that Yuan was ill, he'd definitely come down to the hospital. When that time came, he'd come with a heart full of worries, but see Yuan making out with Gu Yuze tenderly instead. That would be an interesting spectacle for sure. After she sent the text, Shunmeng Qi left the hospital with confidence. Yuan, that idiot, still treating me like her best friend. That idiot will never find out it was me, even on her deathbed. On the contrary, Shunmeng Qi would never have imagined that from the window of the hospital's second floor. Yuan had witnessed everything, from her hiding behind the corner and secretly sending a text, to leaving with a delighted expression. Yuan stood by the window and curled her lips slowly. Of course, she had to make a trip to the hospital and show her face so that Shunmeng Qi would play her tricks and continue stirring up trouble between her and Si Han. Everybody knew about the story of the boy who cried wolf. There was nothing to fear the first and second time, but what about the third and fourth time? If Shunmeng Qi kept failing in her plans to sow discord between them, even if she told the truth the next time, Si Han would no longer believe her. And that's exactly what she wanted. At this moment, in the little garden at the old house, the moment Yuan left, Si Han remained rooted at the same spot without moving. That is, until the phone on the table rang, indicating a text message from Shunmeng Qi. The ringtone of this text message was like the sound of death in Su Yi's ears. Si Han scanned through the contents of the message, cold and without a trace of warmth. His expression didn't change throughout. It was like that pair of black hole-like eyes had swallowed all his emotions. Sui peeked and saw that it was a message from Shunmeng Qi. He then looked at Si Han's reaction again and could guess what it was about. The frightening silence lasted for a long time before Si Han picked his phone up and made a call, asking, "Where are you?" Sui saw that Si Han had used speed dial and knew that he had called Yuan. His expression became gray with defeat instantly. This time, no matter if Yuan was lying or telling the truth, there was no way of coming back from this. Then, he heard Yuan on the receiver replying, "I had some issues, so I want to ring AI hospital midway because I..." Before she could finish, his cold voice interrupted her, "Go to Jing Garden, now?" After finishing the call, Si Han shot Sui an icy look. "Go check?" Sui was stunned, and then nodded his head hurriedly. If things have progressed to this stage, Yuan knows that she can't hide it anymore and has confessed, but Master doesn't believe her and wants to continue investigating. Chapter 68. You're out of chances. Yuan was locked up after arriving at Jing Garden. Click. The sound of the lock made her heart jump, and she subconsciously tightened her grip around the plastic bag containing the meds she'd obtained from the hospital. Barely 2 weeks had gone by, and she was back here again. Even if everything was under control, being trapped in this familiar and luxurious bedroom led to the fear penetrating her soul to annihilate her body rapidly. She had been trapped here for 7 years with an extreme fear of darkness and silence. But eventually, she'd gotten so used to the darkness and dead silence that she started to fear the light and people instead. The scariest thing was not being imprisoned, but that even if freedom was given to her one day, she wouldn't be able to escape from the cage around her heart. Even though she was reborn and returned to life before the tragedy began, she still couldn't escape the memories and shadows from her previous life. Outside, the sound of familiar footsteps came closer and closer, step by step. In such a quiet space, it was unusually clear and terrifying. Creak! The door was pushed open. Looking at the terrible and frightening ghostly figures at the door, Yuan's pupils suddenly contracted. For a moment, the scene in front of her and the memories of her previous life merged completely. The frightened expression of the girl was like a poison that could corrode a person's heart. All of Si Han's senses and restraints turned into ashes in a flash. In the next second, Yuan was thrown onto the bed by an enormous force, and the bag that was in her tight grip landed on the floor with a crash. Just as she was about to speak, her throat got choked, It was getting more and more challenging to breathe, and life was slowly draining away from her body. When she finally regained her breath, she bit down on her tongue hard, and her mouth rapidly filled with the taste of blood. Wan, I've said it before. This was the last time. Now, you've run out of chances. Following this, the man's footsteps got further and further away gradually, and the sound of the lock clanged again. Once she had been relieved of his presence, Wan immediately coughed violently. The fear in her eyes was no longer there, leaving a cold and dim light behind. The study was in total disorder. The big space was frozen, cold and piercing to the bone. The man sat in front of the desk like a weathered sculpture, the violence and sadism eroding the last remnants of humanity on his forehead. In the dead silence, there came a hasty knock on the door suddenly. Get lost, the furious voice stopped the knock on the door. But soon after, the knocks on the door resumed with urgency. As there was no response, the person knocking directly pushed the door open and entered. The situation in the house was more frightening than he'd imagined. At the sight of the monstrous face and scarlet, beast-like eyes, Sui was so scared that he turned pale. However, the issue was so pressing that he had to let the master know. Sui forced himself to stay calm and used all the energy he had to find his voice and said quickly, "Ninth Master, I've checked it myself. Mizzy indeed went to the hospital midway and didn't go to school." Clearly sensing the drastic drop in temperature, Sui's body was soaked in sweat, but the surveillance camera shows that Mizzy didn't go to the emergency room after reaching the hospital, but was at the outpatient department registering to see an old Chinese specialist. As if afraid that Si Han hadn't grasped the main point, Sui specifically added, from beginning to end, Mizzy didn't visit Gu Yuze. Chapter 69. It was all a misunderstanding at that point. Sui's expression looked somewhat complex. That old Chinese doctor is very famous. He's the most skilled at treating insomnia, and you consulted him at the beginning as well? I've transferred the surveillance footage of Ms. Ye's visit. Take a look yourself. Sui opened the surveillance footage on his phone. Yuan was carrying her school bag and sat in front of the old Chinese doctor with a solemn face. "Little miss, where do you feel unwell?" The old Chinese doctor asked. "Doctor, I'm not the one feeling unwell. I'm here on behalf of someone else." Yuan answered. "You silly little girl, how could you visit a doctor on someone else's behalf?" The old Chinese doctor furrowed his brows. Yuan hurriedly explained, "Doc, hear me out. My boyfriend has a serious case of insomnia. He's seen many doctors and tried many methods, but none have worked. Doctor, you're so famous, and he definitely came to seek treatment from you before. I'm just here to find out more about insomnia and understand how he feels." The old Chinese doctor was a little surprised by what she said and also looked somewhat moved. "You, silly little girl, are quite thoughtful. There aren't many patients' families that are as caring as you. All right, I'll tell you." "Thank you, doctor." The girl revealed an extremely joyful smile, pulled out a notebook and pen, and took down notes seriously. Seeing that she was so earnest, the old doctor explained a lot of information in detail. The girl's expression was sincere the whole time and asked very specific questions from time to time. "My grandma told me that long-term insomnia would affect a person's temperament. Is that right?" The old Chinese doctor nodded. "If it's serious, it wouldn't only harm the body, but in the long run, it would also greatly impact a person's character and mental health. This is something they're unable to control, and as a family member, you should try to be more understanding, caring, and patient towards them." I definitely will. I used to aggravate him in the past." The girl looked very guilty. "Previously, to study for my exams, I slept for only 3 to 4 hours a day continuously for a week. That feeling of being sleep-deprived was really horrible. Doctor, tell me more and teach me how to help him so that he'll feel better." The 10-minute-long footage ended, and the room resumed its deathly stillness. The girl's caring words, however, seemed to ring in his ears. Sui's heart was full of mixed feelings. He couldn't express how he felt. "Ninth Master, we seem to have misunderstood Ms. Yi." This deathly stillness went on for an indefinite amount of time when suddenly, an ear-piercing screech of a chair rubbing against the floor resounded. When Sui regained his senses, the man in front of the desk was already gone. Bedroom on the second floor. Bang! The door was forcefully pushed open by someone. The dusky room was cold and quiet. The girl had remained in the same position he'd left her in before. She had her body curled in fetal position and hadn't moved at all. When she heard the door open, her petite frame started shaking violently. Han stood at the same spot, fingers in a tight fist, feet rooted to the ground. His gaze slowly landed on the black plastic bag at the side of the bed, and the contents of the bag sprawled all over the floor. He slowly walked towards the bag, bent over, and picked everything up. A few parcels of Chinese herbal medicine, an outpatient record sheet, a pink notebook. Sprawled across the page were the girl's crammed handwritten notes. Chapter 70. How could she not be disgusted? Han looked at the things on the floor, at the notebook, at the girl's carefully written notes with such careful strokes, and it was as if someone had stabbed his chest. After packing up the items on the ground carefully, the man stood up and walked towards the girl stiffly. At this moment, the girl was hugging her knees and her head was buried deep. Her cautious and repulsed position isolated herself in her own small world. On the side of her curved neck, there were visible bruises, a ghastly sight. Han reached out his hand like he wanted to touch the girl's shoulders. However, as he moved slightly closer, the girl's body started trembling even more. The man pressed his thin lips together, his outstretched hand in midair. After a long while, he decided to retract his hand and slowly took a step back. His eyes didn't leave the girl's body and images in his head kept flashing by. She had told him that she'd thought things through and wanted to try to date him normally. She said she'd work hard to become a sweet melon. She was willing to meet Grandma, dressed up demurely on purpose, picked gifts seriously, and made the old lady so happy. She knew that he had insomnia, probably asked Grandma about it, then specifically went to the hospital to speak to a specialist and found an experienced old doctor to explain his illness, made notes, bought medication. But in the end, what did she get? It was his violent rage without rhyme or reason, unreasonable tongue-lashing, and indiscriminate hurt. She was afraid of him, disgusted with him. How could she not be afraid? How could she not be disgusted? The man's gaze was pitch black, the chill from his body terrifying, the whole place filled with a suffocating oppression. The girl curled up on the bed, noticed the terrifying surroundings, and lifted the little head that was buried between her knees while her whole body trembled. The pair of eyes that looked at him were full of fear and helplessness. She murmured, Sorry. I was wrong. I've learned my lesson. I've learned from it." Looking at the girl's alarmed and panicky expression and hearing the girl admitting her mistake, Han's expression darkened even more. It was like a giant metal clasp was gripping his heart tightly. After some time, the man clenched his fist and walked to the girl again. Under the extremely fearful gaze of the girl, he carefully and slowly embraced her in his arms. The girl seemed to come to her senses. She sobbed too much to even speak properly. "I didn't lie to you. Didn't betray you. I went to find a doctor. You couldn't sleep." Han hugged the girl tighter. The moment he spoke that single word, the tears which the girl had been holding back for so long rolled down in big, hot droplets, soaking his chest. Chapter 71. At least comfort her a little, probably because she'd kept it in for so long. The built-up negative feelings from her previous and current life exploded at that moment. Yuan Wan's tears couldn't stop flowing, and even after crying for more than half an hour, there were no signs of stopping. Han embraced the girl from start till end without speaking a single word or movement. Sui chased after Han after noticing he was gone and stood by the door at this moment. Watching how badly Yuan Wan was crying, he felt a bit guilty as well. They'd really misunderstood her this time. After all, it went without explanation that she must have been frightened by the master just now. She did everything out of goodwill and yet was misunderstood. How could she not be sad? The good thing was that the truth was sorted out. But master, she's crying so badly. Shouldn't you at least comfort her a little? Just standing there like an ice sculpture is scary, all right? For his master, he'd probably reached his limit already. He couldn't really imagine his master comforting the girl. An indefinite amount of time had passed before the man finally loosened his embrace of the girl. His face regained a cold expression, and he said in a calm manner, "Sui, take her back to school." After speaking, he turned and left without a second glance. After Sui heard that, he was initially stunned and looked at the back of his master leaving, and somehow felt that he looked a bit grim. Sui sighed softly, looked at the girl on the bed who was still sobbing, and tried his best to speak softly. "Mizzy, don't cry anymore. Don't worry. The misunderstanding has been cleared and master won't bother you. See, he allowed me to take you back to school." After half an hour, Yuan reached the school gate. "Mizzy, we're here." Sui stopped the car and went to the back to help her with the door. Yuan carried her school bag and got off, looking stone-faced. Her little face was still tear-stained. Sui looked at the girl in front of him, opening his mouth as if to say something, but ended up keeping silent. As the black car slowly left her sight and disappeared into the night, Yuan's empty and numb eyes regained focus. She stood rooted at the same spot for quite some time before slowly walking towards the school. She didn't return to the dormitory immediately, but sat on a long bench by the school's little lake. The cool night wind cut across the surface of the lake and blew against her face, reviving her senses. Not long ago, her past had almost been replayed out, but now, she regained her freedom once again. At first, she merely wanted to beat him at his own game. However, even if everything went according to plan, the fear of Han was real, and so was the pain she felt previously. Not only this time, but the accumulated pain and resentment from both lives. After this episode, she was all burnt out, but after venting, she also felt much better. Fortunately, it was ultimately a near miss, and she successfully changed her original course of life, making it through the crisis this time. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.